Hollow Knight is an easy game. As I was saying, I don't particularly find Hollow Knight to be a challenging game. Again, what? I can't. What the fuck is going on?
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Okay, so maybe Hollow Knight was a lot harder than I thought it'd be, but that doesn't necessarily mean Silksong's the same. Oh god. For anyone that's watched my content before, you know how this works. But just to explain for the rest of you, I've recorded and noted down every single time I died while exploring the worlds of Hallownest and Farloom, and using this, we'll hopefully be able to figure out which of these two masterpieces truly is the hardest to 100%. Just for clarity's sake, these playthroughs are my first time ever playing through these games, as I feel that's the only way to make a somewhat fair comparison. A comparison constructed by one of the worst players to ever touch these games. In fact, before I was even able to start up the game, we're hit by our first roadblock, that being the key bindings for mouse and keyboard. See, the original Hollow Knight had some rather straightforward key bindings. Jump on space, dash on left mouse click, you know, things like that. Silksong, however, has a handful of abilities that at this point in time might as well have been cryptic puzzles to me. Like, what the fuck is Harpoon? Or Needlein? And where's the binding for dash? Is that what sprint's supposed to represent? I can't lie, I was truly baffled, which wasn't a good sign considering the colossal feat standing before us. The brain-dead IQ I just displayed was apparently so embarrassing that we were immediately locked up as a result, before being carried to the nearest psych ward. Unbeknownst to literally every other character though, we were blessed by a sacred power known as plot armor, and following the touching of our tips between this moth-like creature and our carriage, we're given another chance to prove our IQ isn't sitting in the single digits, as we awake in a rather lush cave system covered in moss. With our needle in hand, we complete our first binding, which is Silksong's method of healing, only to immediately open up the main menu and fix some keybinds. Ah, for fuck's sake. Having mucked around for far too long, I reluctantly made my way out of this first room to discover we'd landed in the Moss Grotto. As you can imagine, the creatures roaming these introductory areas have about as much chance of hurting us as dried-aged cow manure. What was concerning, however, was Hornet's downward strike. See, the knight in the original game had a rather straightforward downward strike as it swept the area underneath him, allowing for simple pogos. Hornet, however, thought it'd be a sweet idea to dash in a diagonal line, essentially missing anything directly under her. And as we'll come to see, this definitely took some time to get used to. For now, I spent the next few moments exploring our surrounding areas, and before long, I'd collected what I thought was going to be a delicious treat. Unfortunately, the only thing needing treatment following the consumption of this mossberry was our asshole, as we attempted to fight off one of the worst stomach aches we'd ever conceived. With our bowels playing all sorts of tricks on us, I made my way into the ruined chapel, where we finally had the chance to rest our legs on our very first bench. Given the state of our stomach, it was only right that we'd pass some gas from time to time, although it seemed as though Hornet needed to make sure no one was around first. Little did she know that there wasn't just someone around. It was a creature with a rather peculiar nose, one that had been obliterated due to the copious amounts of gas we'd passed. As you can imagine, the Moss Mother here wasn't too happy with our behaviour, ultimately acting as the first boss fight in the entire game. Unfortunately for the Moss Mother though, she was no more than a tutorial for our new pogoing ability, and before long, we'd pierced her inner core. The bad news is despite clapping the first boss's cheeks, the rapid movements we'd been making didn't sit well with our worsening stomachache. By some miracle, however, we once again awoke to a pain so extreme that it felt like we'd been getting smacked in the same area of our head for hours on end. Ignoring the fact that that's literally what was happening, we learned of the curse plaguing Farloom, and given we've forcefully been dragged here, I guess it's somehow now our responsibility to lift it. Continuing right, we stumble into Bone Bottom, the first town, if you can even call it that, in Farloom. We spent a few minutes chatting with the local drug addicts as well as Peb, the first merchant, looking to rip us off with his ridiculous prices. Joke's on him though, we don't even use the same currency apparently, as I have no idea what these red balls were supposed to represent. Or at least that was the case until about 5 minutes later, where I stumbled across a chest that contained our first set of rosaries. Admittedly, this small amount wasn't nearly enough to buy anything useful from the shop, so we instead looked to explore the remaining areas of Bone Bottom, only to be interrupted by Sherma, the most delusional pilgrim to ever exist. You're telling me he thought he could open up this gate merely by singing at it. With that said, we didn't really have time to diagnose Sherma as we'd fallen into our very first arena fight. Not only did this arena fight include some rather annoying enemies in these flying fuckers, but it was during this fight that I started to understand how Hornet's healing ability worked. See, attacking enemies in the previous game would generate a resource called Soul, and the knight would be able to siphon a certain amount of that soul to heal damage at a rate of 1 mask per heal essentially. Hornet on the other hand is completely different. She generates silk by attacking enemies, and while a certain amount is required, she's able to heal 3 masks at once. Not only that, but I also found out that she can heal in mid-air, giving us infinitely more opportunities to sneak in a quick heal during intense fights. Awkwardly enough, completing this arena battle leads us to the other side of this gate, and while I'd hoped Sherma would understand that it was all our doing, he continued to disappoint me.
2 seconds later.
Realizing I was on the brink of going insane, I graciously backed away from Sherma, ending up at our first pay-to-win bench. These were a thing in the original Hollow Knight, but as we'll come to see, everything, and I mean everything, costs fucking rosaries to use here. Wait, what the fuck? Wait, why'd that close? I have to pay again? What the fuck? The enemies here in the Marrow weren't too bad to deal with. There were a few beefier guys, but their attack patterns consisted of running from left to right, meaning they were easy enough to dispatch. It was also around this point where I came across the Shard Pendant, our very first tool. Tools are essentially Silksong's iteration of Hollow Knight's charms. With that being said, they're separated into one of 3 colors. You have your red tools, which are limited use items. These could be pins that you throw or consumables that buff you in certain ways. These tools are refreshed when resting at benches and more often than not require shell shards to repair and replenish. Blue tools on the other hand are combat focused passive buffs that oftentimes have to do with silk generation or healing. Yellow tools lastly are more along the lines of miscellaneous support tools like the Shard Pendant we just picked up. The Shard Pendant in particular allows us to pick up more shell shards from defeated enemies, and while it's kind of a dogshit tool, it's all we've got to work with at the moment. Along the way, I stumbled across this rather peculiar group of fleas, and while they seemed friendly, them telling me to rest tickled something inside my consciousness. Luckily, being abducted wasn't on the table, and before long we'd come across yet another bug singing. I guess that's all there is to do in Farloom. This here is Chakra, a wannabe opera singer that's barely managed to make ends meet by drawing maps of each area. Fortunately for her, we're just the person she needs, as without these maps, we'd have absolutely no idea where the fuck we're supposed to go. To help with our poor navigation skills, we also purchased a compass, which like the Wayward variant in the previous game, became one of the few tools that I essentially never took off. With compass in hand, I made my way back into the Moss Grotto, where I saw what appeared to be a homeless man. Given our impeccable dress sense, it was to be expected that he'd lash out at us in an attempt to rob us blind, although it soon became clear once our needle pierced his torso that he was just another lost pilgrim. This area seemed to be filled with these pilgrims, which could only mean one thing. There were rosaries to be stolen. Decimating pilgrims was one thing, but what really got me excited was when we came across this strange statue. Here we're urged to bind before being blessed with our first silk skill, the Silk Spear. From here we made our way into another cave area where we met with the Moss Druid. He mistakes us for a slave and asks that we pick some berries for him. Slave or not, there was a reward offered, and given our dire situation, we could use any advantage we could get. Unfortunately, it seems we're unable to collect one of the moss berries as it's barely out of reach. Disheartened, I looked to drown out my sorrows by spending all of our hard-earned rosaries, although the only thing we could afford was some craft metal. I have no idea what this shit's used for. As we explored more of the bone marrow, we came across a strange symbol, and if there's one thing people with low IQ do, it's following signs pointing in a certain direction. Wait. Regardless, we ended up in a room with bells, although that wasn't the most surprising thing. At the back of the room was a creature tied up in silk, and despite us cutting him loose and saving him from pissing his pants, he repaid us by taking the virginity of our death counter. The Bell Beast is the first boss to deal 2 masks of damage with his attacks as well as contact damage. This definitely caught me off guard the first attempt, especially considering how unexpected his jump attack was. Granted, outside of these charge attacks, he's barely got any other moves in his repertoire. He does throw out some balls every now and then, but these are also fairly easy to avoid. Following his defeat, the Bell Beast leaves behind an orb that when grabbed, transports us to a dreamlike instance made completely of silk. At the top of this instance is our first Silk Heart, a passive ability that restores some silk over time. If that wasn't good enough, the Bell Beast seemed to pledge his undying loyalty to us after witnessing, dare I say, our divine skills. With the fast travel system unlocked, we ignored it as we turned our focus towards the first spell of awakening. Further along, we came across what you could consider some lukewarm platforming. It wasn't by any means difficult, but the introduction of disintegrating platforms this early on didn't give me much confidence going forward. This feeling only intensified as we moved onto these buds that had to be pogoed off in quick succession should we have any hope of saving Farloon. Between these tight platforms and Hornet's differing downward strike, it was only a matter of time before we'd start missing some jumps. Things would only get worse as I soon found myself face to face with this absolute behemoth.
I'm fucking shitting myself.
And while the romantics tell us to never judge a book by its cover, that advice couldn't have been more dogshit as we were pulverized into oblivion moments later. This guy was by far the toughest enemy we'd come across so far, and from what I could tell, he's not even a goddamn boss. What made this fight so tough was his range of attacks. Not only does he have a massive leap attack, his normal ones seem to cover half the fucking arena, making avoiding damage a complete nightmare, especially considering our limited movement capabilities. It felt as though I'd gotten my ass pounded more times than I'd blinked, and given the embarrassing nature of our death count, I knew something had to change. That's when I realized there was a smaller cave system towards the entrance of this room, and while the Scar Guard could still attack in this space, he couldn't use his leap attack. This meant we could chip away at his health while spacing ourselves accordingly to always be outside of his attack range. This ultimately worked, and for the first time in this game, I felt as if I had accomplished something worthwhile. Second-hand embarrassment aside, we freed Grindel, grabbed our first red tool, and listened in on some of the most seductive moaning I'd ever heard. What I expected to be a good time, however, saw us taking a massive fucking bell to the forehead. Our adventure saw us delving deeper into Farloon, however this time coming across a lava-filled area known as the Deep Docks. The first thing we did, as always, is buy out the map for this area, as well as unlock the Bellway station. As positive as these steps were, the only thing I was being reminded about was how fucking broke we were this whole time. Deep Docks was an interesting location for sure. I mean, you can literally jump across the molten hot ground without taking any damage. How that works is beyond me. Like the areas before it, Deep Docks also doesn't feature any insanely annoying enemies that we have to deal with. There were a few flying enemies that can be a bit of a pain, but I hardly struggled with any of the combat encounters while I was down here. What I did struggle with was admitting to myself that we were absolutely broke, and there's no worse feeling than rocking up to another merchant only to get armored when you realize that you can't afford jack shit. What was a surprise was the fact that the most random of enemies were starting to do 2 masks of damage.
Wait, did that do 2 masks of damage? Was I already lost? Well, I'm so confused.
As concerning as this was, we continued on as we stumbled across our first spool fragment, as well as our first ancestral art, the Swift Step. This not only acts as this game's dash, but it also lets us sprint at the speed of light, an ability we would definitely need if we would have any chance of besting this next boss. Now ironically enough, I thought of Lace as Hornet's counterpart from the original Hollow Knight. From the whimsical yet dance-like music to the acrobatic moveset, she truly did feel like Hornet's successor. In that sense, I also found her to be rather easy as most of her attacks are extremely telegraphed. Defeating her grants us access to our second Bell of Awakening, as well as a completely new area known as the Far Fields. It was here where we started to run into some rather tough enemies in the form of these ant warriors. Not only that, but to use one of their main benches in this area, you have to pay rosaries every single time. While I was here, I decided to buy the tool pouch from Maud, before paying a visit to the seamstress. She roasts the shit out of our attire only to offer us an undeniable upgrade, as long as we can provide her with the materials. Thus, I spent the next 5 minutes farming spined cores from whatever the hell these things are supposed to be. After collecting 25 spined cores, we returned to the seamstress who upgraded our cloak to the Drifter's Cloak. This cloak upgrade couldn't have come at a better time, as its floating capabilities would come in handy after being jump scared by this bastard. What was even more surprising was how smooth this guy's attack animations were.
Wait, what? Why is this guy's attacks in 400 FPS?
They were so smooth in fact that I'd get distracted not knowing that a molten rock was about to make contact with my forehead. Outside of that though, there's not much else to say about the fourth chorus. His attacks, while visually appealing, are telegraphed and slow, and despite him breaking the ground we stand on, our new Drifter's Cloak allows us to hover for more than enough time to avoid danger. Speaking of our Drifter's Cloak though, another thing it lets us do is use these air geysers to launch ourselves upwards. Using it, I was able to make my way back to the cave where Chakra was. Wait, where is she? Yeah, so apparently once you defeat the main boss of the area, Chakra decides to just fuck off on holiday or something, which is fine, good for her. But now I was stuck in far fields with no idea where to go next. After spending what felt like a lifetime crying, I picked myself up and took the bellways back to Bone Bottom. I didn't necessarily have a goal in mind when I made this decision, so you could say I was pleasantly surprised when I saw these strange badges on this notice board. This was my introduction to the wish system in Silksong, which essentially acts as side quests offered by NPCs throughout the world of Farloom. Considering we'd just picked up a whole bunch of wishes, I decided to see if I could now reach that mossberry that was just out of our reach earlier before, and using our new dash ability, I was able to just barely reach it. With our first wish completed, I made my way back to the Moss Druids, tripping pilgrims along the way as this was another requirement for one of our wishes. Upon returning to the Druid, he hands us the Druid's Eye, another tool required for 100%. While I was still in Bone Bottom, I ended up breaking my rosary necklaces just to afford our first Moss Shard. I also spent some time exploring the Moss Home, where I stumbled across yet another breakable wall which led to us completing our first Silk Spool. At this point, I didn't exactly have a clear path to take. The only place I could think of was this area which had that massive Scar Guard was guarding. Along the way, I checked in with the Flea Caravan, with which we accepted a wish to find and guide the many lost fleas back to them. Our main priority, however, saw us tackling the Hunter's March, the most challenging area we'd come across so far. Not only is this place filled with these annoying ass ant enemies, it has some rather tight platforming and plenty of cancerous traps.
Ah, bro, just piss off, man.
Even the goddamn rest benches in this area come equipped with a fucking trap. Like, whose idea was this?
Bro, what the fuck is up with this area? I can't even rest.
The worst part of all, however, was the Savage Beastfly. This fucking boss, I don't even know where to start. You'd think he'd be a complete cakewalk as he's basically just a normal beastfly that's eaten too many Big Macs in his lifetime. By himself, he's definitely a manageable boss, but the true struggle begins when he starts to spawn in his little butt buddies, and together they force you into a corner and essentially have their way with you. I'm not even sure if challenging is the right word to describe this fight. It's more frustrating than anything else. 2 masks of contact damage, endless fucking ads, a cancerous moveset where he just nonchalantly moves from one side to another. All of it just pissed me off more and more with every attempt. I don't even think I want to know how many attempts this boss took me, but I can say without a doubt that this was the most cancerous encounter yet. Despite me getting my shit kicked in over and over again, things were somehow about to get even worse, as the coveted item this asshole was guarding turned out to be the Crest of the Beast, one of the worst crests in the entire game in my opinion. Crests in this game are very important as they not only dictate what tools you can use, but they change up your passive ability as well as your attacks. The more annoying part of collecting these crests though is that they force themselves onto your build the moment you acquire them. For now, our priority lied in finding the nearest bench and switching back to our Hunter Crest, as I just knew platforming with this Beast Crest would be an absolute nightmare. Back in the far fields, I made use of our Drifter's Cloak to work our way back up towards another new area. Along the way, I came across another poor soul being tortured to death by Sherman's musical ability, yet despite our best efforts, we couldn't get him to stop. Continuing up, we ended up in Greymore, a depressing area filled with plenty of lost pilgrims, as well as these crow things. These flying fuckers in particular were trying their best to win the award for the most annoying enemy yet, as they'd constantly hover outside of our attack range. Similar to Hunter's March, this area had plenty of platforming challenges, and I'd go so far as to say that this area was the most crucial area when it came to learning exactly how to pogo using the Hunter's Crest. The amount of times I fucked up while trying to ascend these balloons can't be overstated, and while it was a rather frustrating experience, it was a necessary one, especially when we consider what's waiting for us in some of the later areas in the game. Atop these balloons hid another Silk skill, Threadstorm, which quickly became one of my favorites in the entire game. Following this, we ventured to the other side of Greymord, where we began climbing this tower filled with scissormen. Considering these scissor guys had reignited some PTSD I'd gotten as a kid from Clock Tower, I wasn't feeling too confident going into the Chapel of the Reaper. To my surprise, however, this chapel only really featured an arena battle, consisting of the numerous enemies we'd faced in Greymore so far. In that sense, I didn't find it to be particularly challenging, and in a fit of sheer dominance, we made sure to put this diseased bug out of his misery as we quite literally siphoned a whole ass crest out of his soul. Unlike the Beast Crest, however, I did find myself enjoying the Reaper Crest, so much so that I decided to rock it for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's not like it's gonna get me killed or anything. Holy fuck, I'm so dogshit. All joking aside, I did continue to use the Reaper Crest as I found the downward strike to be far more forgiving than the Hunter's diagonal dash. The only thing I disliked about it was the slower attack speed, but I figured this wouldn't matter this early on into the game. Rash judgments aside, we made our way back to the Flea Caravan as I wanted them to know that they could trust me with hunting down their kin. I had initially meant this as a threat, but it seems they took it the wrong way, and before I knew it, I was travelling with their caravan to an undisclosed location. Unfortunately, that undisclosed location just turned out to be Greymore once again, and despite my initial disappointment, they did drop us off at the outskirts, meaning it was a rather short walk to the next disaster waiting to happen. In this case though, it seems as though the disaster had already happened. Upon our first visit to Bellheart, it seems as though the residents were all participating in what I can only describe as some rather kinky roleplay. Unfortunately, we didn't have the means at this point to join in ourselves, so we instead made our way into Shellwood, a far more tame and relaxing area. Well, at least that's what I initially thought. In reality, it seems as though we couldn't avoid the kink allegations after all, as we found ourselves being whipped into shape by a hoarding pilgrim. The Reaper Crest really started to shine in this area, as it made pogoing an absolute breeze. It didn't, however, make pogoing any easier when we're being swarmed by countless exploding enemies. This was the closest I had gotten to losing my rosaries altogether, and despite me reaching my cocoon, the nervous energy that had swelled up inside of me wasn't about to dissipate as we got our asses blasted by Sister Splinter. Sister Splinter isn't a hard fight by any means, but that doesn't mean there aren't some tricky sections, especially when she starts filling the arena with barbed vines, essentially cutting off the amount of space we get to move around in. In saying that, we were able to defeat her on our second attempt. Are you fucking kidding me? For the most pathetic death now associated with our name, I made sure we defeated her on our next attempt, as there's no way I'd be able to carry on having died just like that. Apparently, Sister Splinter was only the starter, as we still had to platform our way towards our next ancestral art. With the ability to wall climb now imbued into our essence, we're able to climb our way back to this breakable wall, which leads back into Bellheart. To my dismay, however, these bell-filled tunnels weren't as empty as I'd like. I have no idea why I thought pogoing off these furballs was a good idea, because it ultimately cost me all my hard-earned rosaries. Oh, for fuck's sake, man. Oh, I have to be doing this wrong. There has to be another way.
No shit.
What you're supposed to do here is use the cling grip art we had just fucking unlocked to slowly slide down and avoid these things altogether. Not only did this experience confirm my IQ sat within these single digits, it also meant that I went into the fight against Widow feeling quite dejected. And I'll be the first one to tell you that she isn't the type of boss we can afford to screw around with. Widow was what I'd consider to be the first real skill check of this game. The Savage Beastfly made me want to skull bleach out of pure frustration. Widow, on the other hand, pushed me to get better at the game as her attacks, while fast as shit, were all extremely telegraphed. It was then up to us to figure out how to best avoid her assembly of attacks. Now, before I glaze this fight too much, she is the first one to have a second phase, something that we had to learn the hard way. Fuck yes, man, finally. Holy shit, that was a good fight. Wait, are you gonna be? No. What the fuck?
2 seconds later.
Nah, I swear to god, if I fucking die here, come on. Oh, for fuck's sake! The more we fought, the more I realized it was just best to focus on her and ignore the bell balls after their initial trajectory. See, while I spent most of my earlier attempts focusing on the balls, pause, it didn't work out as we'd often get caught out by her rush attacks afterwards. The moment I focused on Widow, however, I was able to defeat her. We bind the Needle ability, which grants us the unique ability to play Beethoven's concertos. More importantly, defeating Widow freed the residents of Belhart from participating in a sick, kinky roleplay, a prospect they seemed rather excited about. Much like the City of Tears in Hollow Knight, I would consider Belhart to be the centralized hub town of Silksong.
Well, duh.
Not only does it have a wishboard and a merchant, it also houses Pin Master Pliny. As thanks for saving the town, he agrees to sharpen our needle, granting us a significant damage boost in the process. Unfortunately, that's where the freebies end, as Piney here asks us to collect some pale ore from the Citadel if we ever want our nail to be sharpened again. At this point in our adventure, I decided we needed to start clearing out some of these wishes. These saw us collecting pull-up hearts from around Shellwood, getting baited by silver bells underneath Belhart. Bro, what? How do you get the bell down there then? And tracking down Trip, who had somehow got caught by Border Patrol after smuggling drugs. During all of this, I also got to spend some time playing Lottie's Target minigame. I just wish the rat bastard had told us we couldn't move past this market the first time around, as we didn't have unlimited rosaries to work with. Aw, you fucking scumbag. Thankfully, our aim proved true on our first real attempt, earning us our first tool pouch upgrade in the process. Considering we were in the questing mood, I made my way back to Bone Bottom to see if there were any more wishes to pick up, and fuck me. There goes my entire Sunday. Again, most of these were fairly simple, ultimately seeing us hunt down the thickest beetles to ever exist, as well as a skull tyrant with anger issues. Turning these wishes in awarded us with some rather dogshit rewards if I'm being honest, but hey, we'll take a memory locket at least. From here we return to Deep Docks, as we can now access new areas using our Cling Grip. What I wasn't aware of was the fact that these new areas came bundled with a clusterfuck of an orgy. Fortunately for us, I'm quite experienced when it comes to orgies, meaning this was but a slight inconvenience in the grand scheme of things.
What do you mean by that?
We're given another mask shard for our troubles, which urged us to find one last shard, as it meant getting our first full mask. It's just a shame that this meant fuck all, as we're still prone to dying in 3 hits. With our confidence at an all-time low, we made our way back to the halfway home, where we looked to talk to Krieg about a request of his. This lazy bastard wanted us to do some pest control up on the roof, and us being the brokies that we are, agreed without hesitation. As tedious as these rage pelts were to collect, it was all worth it in the end, as we're paid a crafting kit for our services. From here we returned to Greyroot to hand in our pull-up parts, before making our way to a completely new area known as the Wormways. Now, at first, I assumed this was Silksong's iteration of Deep Nest. There are countless moving worms, every room, no matter how safe it looks, is littered with cancerous sucker punches, and the platforming, while simple, seemed to highlight my skill issue now more than ever. It also didn't help that the connecting areas from the wormways housed this mole-looking bastard that couldn't stop throwing up. Thankfully, we had these ledges to help block most of his Bro, what? How am I getting hit twice there? Honestly, he was such a massive pain in the ass that I knew I had to obliterate him here and now. That said, I don't even think it was worth it, as all he drops is a beast shard. Either way, with the path clear, we strolled back to Bone Bottom, where I purchased a simple key, which we then used to open this door back in the wormways. Despite our dogshit timing, the one saving grace regarding these dropping worms is that we can hit them for an infinite amount of silk. This fundamentally kills any lethality they once had, and before long we'd ended up in a lab owned by Xylotl here. He hands us a needle file and asks if we can use it to suck off these plants.
What?
Or at least I think that's how he described it. While doing so, I came across a shortcut which led back into the Moss Grotto, and given the fact that we hadn't mapped out this part of it, I thought, fuck it, why not explore? This led us to discovering the Chapel of the Wanderer, and after another straightforward arena battle, we were able to bind the soul of this potato sack, which took the form of the crest of the Wanderer. It took me about 5 seconds to fall in love with this crest. Sure, its attack range is shorter than a micro penis, but its thrusting speed, I mean, it's slashing speed. Now that's a different story. It might not have the best selection of tool sockets, but it does offer a decent array of colours, meaning I could at least run most of the better tools I had found so far. Alongside this, it's also got one of the most forgiving downward slashes out there, making pogoing and platforming in general a complete breeze. Glazing aside, we made our way back to Xylotl, who turns our needle into a plasmium file. This bad boy crafts another mask out of pure plant nut, which while disgusting, allows us to tank another hit completely. And considering the area we ventured into next, this type of buff was almost essential. The blasted steps, much like the Hunter's March, is where I'd say there's another considerable step up in terms of difficulty. Enemies either come equipped with shields to block your attacks or shoot out unpredictable drills designed to bait out your jump. The worst part, however, is without a doubt the platforming, as we're forced to pogo our way across these hanging bells while gale force winds cloud our view. Eventually, we reach the halfway point, which featured not only a bellway station, but a much needed bench. Now, while we could continue upwards to reach the Citadel, I wasn't confident that it explored nearly enough of the remaining areas. This gut feeling was proven right moments later, as I decided to explore more of the blasted steps only to end up in yet another boss arena. The Great Conch Flies, or as I like to call them, the Great Telegraphers, are one of the easiest bosses in the entire game. Not only are they massive, making hitting them easy, their attacks are extremely basic and telegraphed to the point where you're basically seeing the future before it happens. Considering the strong winds past this area though, I thought it best that we return to previous regions where I finally stumbled across our first needle and gate. Playing the needle in here opened the way to Weave Nest Attila, an abandoned weaver nest that housed but one creature, a mysterious life form known as Eva. If I'm being honest, I have no idea what Eva is. All I cared about was the fact that she could upgrade our crests. For now, that's all she can do for us, but you can bet your sweet ass we'll be returning here in the future, as her buffs are honestly some of the best in the entire game. Now, considering I hadn't seen a soul outside of Eva in this nest, I dropped my guard, which was probably the worst thing I could possibly do. Having been quite literally rolled, I made my way right where I found a secret entrance to another room. This room contained lava for whatever reason and housed another tricky platforming challenge which I aced without breaking a sweat.
Stop the cap!
I eventually locked in and grabbed another Marshard, before making my way over to the other side of the Moss Grotto only to run into an old friend.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Considering we'd speared the shit out of the other Moss Mother, I figured this one had to be a distant cousin. Before I could interrogate her, however, she was forced to release her twin sister who she'd kept locked up after finding out she had been sleeping with her husband. Dealing with one Moss Mother wasn't so bad. Two, on the other hand, with family problems no less, was a completely different story. We pride ourselves on solving familial problems, and in this case, there was no better fix than to exterminate their entire bloodline. Having silenced their bickers, we collect Weavelight in peace before returning to Bone Bottom, where I did fuck all. I have no problem admitting that I was completely lost here. I would spend whole ass minutes just running back and forth through Bone Bottom only to check the map and pretend I knew where I was going next. After God knows how long, I found myself back in Greymore, where we abused the shit out of this cling grip to reach another spool fragment. Further along, I accidentally revealed a breakable wall, only to get devoured by these cancerous rat-like creatures. Ridding the area of them allowed us a chance to sit down and have a talk with Styx, who after seeing how long our needle was, immediately pledged its loyalty to us. This was obviously a new area, as I hadn't bought the map for it yet, although we couldn't progress further at this point as the only entrance area seemed to be caged off. Now whenever I wasn't sure of where to go next, I would always return to Bone Bottom, a choice I'd soon come to regret as was snuck up on by another Skull Tyrant. Like the Moss Mothers, it seems as though this one was looking for revenge, and while it got close to ending us early on, we were the ones to have the final laugh. Apparently, one of the pilgrims had been caught in the crossfire and killed, a fact we couldn't care less about as we had better things to do, like discovering Sinner's Road. Wait, fuck. Sinner's Road, more so than Hunter's March or the Blasted Steps, is a true step up in terms of difficulty. The enemies, as we'd already experienced, love getting a taste of you. The area is full of traps that have you falling into maggot-infested waters that stop you from healing, and the one seemingly working bench doesn't actually fucking work, until you complete a goddamn platforming challenge with moving platforms. Like, who thought this shit was a good idea? And which sadistic cult are they a part of? The Wanderer Crest and Drifter's Cloak were hard carrying me in this area, as they're the only reason my office walls didn't have holes in them the shape of my fist. Again, we came across a breakable wall, which to my horror led to an area simply known as the Mist. As per usual, it didn't take me long to figure out that I had absolutely no fucking idea what I was doing. Thankfully, I didn't have too much time to panic as we were being choked out moments later. What the fuck just happened? This area was a puzzle in of itself, as each exit led to a completely random room, it felt like. I was stuck here for what felt like centuries, and the only way I was able to grasp this hellhole was to accept help from one of my best friends, Google.
In all seriousness though, how the fuck is anyone supposed to know that you can play the needle in around these moths who then and only then will fly towards the correct exit? Taking the correct exits would eventually lead us to the exhaust organ, a small area with some rather powerful exhaust fans. The larger annoyance however was having to listen to whoever was playing that god-awful organ, and being the arseholes that we were, it soon became our main objective to eliminate whoever it was. I didn't know it at the time, but Phantom here acts as one of the two final bosses of Act 1. Now while I didn't know that for sure at this point, her difficulty spoke for itself as I found myself getting absolutely blasted on earlier attempts. Given her tiny frame, she's quite nimble and extremely swift, making damaging her a challenge on its own. A lot of her attacks also come with follow-up combos which caught me off guard quite a number of times. But if there was one attack that acted as my kryptonite, it was her deflect ability. Yeah, ting, there it is, the fucking deflect. God, this fucking attack blows, man. It's so shit. For whatever reason, the moment she deflected my attack, a penis would fall in front of me, and despite my straightness, I seemed to be choking on that thing an awful lot. I could not for the life of me dodge this attack, and it cost me time and time again. Surprisingly though, I didn't find her second phase all that hard, as I was able to sneak in lots of damage during her meteor strikes. It took a good while, but I was finally able to give her a taste of her own medicine, before stealing her deflecting ability for ourselves. With another silk skill acquired, I made my way back through the mist, which had strangely disappeared back to Sinner's Road. While here, I paid a visit to Kroll and Benjen, who tasked us with collecting some roach guts from these anal creatures. Despite my heart rate sitting at a constant 150, this small task helped tremendously in learning how to defeat them without ever getting hit. Following this wish, we sacrificed our ability to heal to grab the barbed bracelet, discovered an area called Barlord that somehow looked even more AIDS than Sinner's Road, and made our way back to Styx, this time from the other side, opening up a shortcut in the process. With another area explored, it was once again up to my map reading abilities to decipher where the fuck I was supposed to go next.
Okay, we are cooked.
Strangely enough, the first place I noticed was this tiny ass area in Hunter's March, and considering I wanted nothing to do with that place, I decided to go there first and get it cleared up. What awaited us was another Scar Guard, although this time he'd brought his little yes men. Awkwardly enough, the addition of this flying arsehole made things infinitely harder as it limited our space in which we could dodge these massive swings of the Scar Guard. More often than not, I found myself backed into the corner, which never ended well. This room became my burial site time and time again, until one fateful attempt where it just decided to stop being complete dog shit. Our reward for defeating these guys was a whole bunch of rosaries. Yes, that's it. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed, but alas, I picked myself back up and headed to Bellheart as I knew there was a good few items I could spend my hard-fought rosaries on. At this point, I was in the spending mood, meaning it was only right that we returned to Bone Bottom, only to discover our friend wasn't anywhere to be seen. Moving to the left revealed a rather grim sight where we witnessed the burial, or tossing rather, of the pilgrim that had met his end when the Skull Tyrant attacked us. As saddening as all this was, all we really cared about was whether or not the shopkeeper would sell us his stocks, and thankfully after leaving the area and returning, we could spend all the rosaries we wished. Our next stop saw us returning to Deep Docks where we bought a few more things from the Forged Order. Finally, we ended up at the Pilgrim's Rest where I made sure to buy out this guy's entire store as I never wanted to pay to get in here again. With our arsenal stacked to the high heavens, it was finally time to return to the Bastard Steps where I spent over 5 minutes playing dice with this random pilgrim. Having clapped his cheeks and stolen his most prized possession, I was feeling more confident than ever as I scaled my way across the harsh terrain of this area. At the top, we came across the Grand Gate, a gate that would only open if all 5 bells of awakening had been rung. Thankfully, we had already rung all 5 bells required, meaning all there was to do was to play our needle and watch in awe as the Citadel gates opened up before us. My first attempt against the last judge went how you'd expect. Holy shit, I just got a face full of her fucking ass cheeks. As did the second, and third, and fourth. This was by far the hardest boss we'd encountered so far. It didn't take me long to consistently get through her first phase, as she just kind of spammed the same jump attack over and over. Her second phase, however, that's where shit truly hit the fan. All of her attacks in this phase come with a follow-up fire element. Whether it's shockwaves that race across the arena after her jumps, or whole-ass firewalls that appear after her spin attacks. Having to avoid these follow-up attacks made it extremely challenging to getting close to deal damage to her, and more often than not, I found myself getting char-grilled to perfection instead. Through sheer willpower and determination though, we were able to take her down. Wait, what the? No. What the fuck is going on? So apparently this cocksucker has her very own self-destruct sequence that she just whips out the moment she's about to lose the fight. Talk about fucking cheap. The worst part, however, is if you die to this final blast, you have to do the fight all over again. Fortunately, I had gotten my ass kicked so many times at this point that I breezed through the fight on my very next attempt. With the last judge decimated, the Grand Gate opened, revealing the feeble Citadel as well as marking the beginning of Act 2. For all the hype and build-up surrounding the Citadel during Act 1, it's safe to say that we couldn't have started Act 2 any worse, as the very first elevator we stepped onto couldn't seem to handle our weight. As if things couldn't get any worse, upon awakening we stumble across a few benches that we not only have to pay for, you can only use them once. Leaving the safety of these benches, we come to learn that we've crash landed in a place called the Underworks. The enemies in this area might not be the toughest to take out, but traversing this area can be quite annoying given the amount of machinery blocking our path. Ignoring the fact that this machinery seems to be doing fuck all in terms of powering the Citadel above, the other annoying aspect of this area is the fact that most of the benches here are single use, meaning we have to pay rosaries anytime we want to use them. Whether I was dropping into steaming exhaust blasts or getting railed in arena battles, it was apparent that I was straight up not having an enjoyable experience down here. Completing this arena challenge rewarded us with yet another spool fragment. The following 25 minutes or so remain a blur if I'm being honest. I had no idea what I was doing or where I was supposed to go. I just waltzed around until I stumbled into another arena challenge that I once again got humbled in. It was almost as if being in the Underworks made me play like I had an underdeveloped brain, because the gameplay on display during these sections was nothing short of diabolical. After some questionable plays, I managed to find myself in a wholly new area known as the Coral Chambers, an area littered with some of the best rosary farms in the entire game. Either way, I continued to explore the Citadel, destroying any enemies we came across as they provided a decent amount of rosaries. Despite its elegant design, this place still had some rather tricky platforming segments which were made even harder with all these flying arseholes surrounding us. If I'm being honest though, the most concerning thing was just how dogshit I was at platforming this far into our adventure. We eventually came across a rather barren dining hall, which fortunately for us meant we surely had free access to this pale oil. Unfortunately, Lady Luck wasn't on our side here, as we're interrupted by Mergwyn, a washed up bug who'd been wasting away in a heaping pile of shit for the last 10 years. According to him, if we're to have any chance at obtaining this pale oil, we'll need to bring him different dishes from around Farloom, most of which I had absolutely no idea where to obtain. Considering the daunting nature of such a quest, I instead chose to ignore it as I made my way towards the summit of the Citadel. Along the way we fought everything from flying fencing bugs to massive fencing bugs. All this combat experience would serve us well as we were eventually confronted by the Cogwork Dancers. At their core, these guys act in a similar fashion to the Grey Conchflies, as their attacks are all extremely telegraphed. With that said, as the fight continues on, their attacks become faster and faster, giving you less time to react. Not only that, but their attacks come with a wide range, oftentimes taking up large parts of the screen. In hindsight, they aren't a particularly hard boss to defeat, which makes it all the more embarrassing that they managed to take me out on my first attempt. My second attempt was a lot better, and I truly started to appreciate just how fun this fight could be, particularly in its final duo phase. Its true final phase in comparison is a rather sorry sight, as we're forced to take out the other dancer as it pathetically limps its way around the arena. Defeating the Cogwork Dancers summons a massive elevator that not only refuses to go up for us, but also starts talking.
What the hell is even that?
Before we're able to ride this elevator up towards the cradle, we needed to learn the Song of the Architects, hear the voices of the Keeper, and learn the melody of the Conductors. 3 tasks that might as well have been given to us in Latin, as I had no idea what the fuck these cryptic requests meant. Seeing as we were unable to ascend the tower, I instead made my way below into an area called the Cogwork Core. It was at this point that I realized that whoever designed the Citadel was a piece of shit, as there's quite literally no reason why half of the spinning blade obstacles should even exist down here. I mean, imagine working maintenance down here. You're not surviving the first week, let alone long enough to receive any sort of income. Workplace health and safety regulations aside, I participated in a few more arena challenges while down here, and while none of them proved to be too challenging, they did add an element of falling platforms throughout the gauntlet. It's always worth completing these arena challenges, as more often than not, you're rewarded with upgrades like another Mars shard or another spool fragment. You may have noticed that I haven't mentioned the enemies patrolling this area at all, and that's for good reason. See, the enemies present in the Cogwork Core are complete pushovers. Or so I thought. In all seriousness though, there are only a handful of enemy variants present in the Cogwork Core, and most of them are extremely basic with even more simple attack patterns. minions. This paired with us being able to knock them off these short platforms makes them a rather tame group to deal with overall. Wanting nothing more than to be done with this place, I returned to the coral chambers where I made my way east, fighting off every fencing maggot that got in my way. This led us to another building as well as a corpse holding onto a white key. This will be useful later on, but for now our main focus saw us ring yet another bell of awakening. What wasn't apparent at the time, however, was ringing this bell would automatically summon every homeless person within a 20-kilometer vicinity. Not wanting to associate with said homeless people, we looked to return to the coral chambers where I tried desperately to find an area in which to use the white key which we had just stolen off a rotting corpse. That's when I remembered something from earlier. I had stumbled across a peculiar lift that I couldn't unlock as it needed a specific key. Well, it just so happens that the white key was the missing piece all along. This lift drops us off in White Ward, the creepiest location we'd found ourselves in yet, which is ironic because there's hardly a soul in which to scare us. Outside of the occasional bandage head and these creepy scissor guys, there's really no threat to us at all down here, and yet I found myself shitting my pants constantly as I walked its halls. Even so, I was determined to explore every inch of this place, and thank God I did, as we soon came across one of the best tools in the entire game. The injector band. This tool significantly increases the speed of our bindings, meaning we're given a lot more opportunities to heal during tough, fast-paced fights. To my surprise, this area also connected to a different section of the underworks. A much worse section, might I add, as it not only contained explosive flying bugs, but platforms that melted away into the lava below us. This isn't to say I regret finding this place. In fact, we were able to grab another piece of craft metal as well as another ancestral art in the form of the claw line. As always, we're given a little obstacle course in which we're able to test out our new ability, a course I very much needed as I somehow managed to kill myself in this pseudo tutorial area.
You're a fucking idiot.
As embarrassing as this death was, I didn't let it deter me from escaping this absolute hellhole, and after coming to terms with the fact that the ability auto jumps after colliding with each enemy, it became a simple test to escape. Returning to the top of the underwork saw us meeting with the 12th Architect, a being so intelligent it made me stand in awe for 10 minutes straight. The 12th Architect acts as another merchant, although like the Forged Daughter, a lot of their tools required a craft metal to build. Seeing as we didn't have many craft metals to spare, I instead floated my way down into this small cave which housed another spool fragment for us to collect. In typical Hollow Knight fashion, I then spent the next 10 minutes panicking as I couldn't find the exit to the underworks, only to stumble across it by accident moments later. With this new sense of freedom, I decided to head back to the first shrine only to learn that it was instead known as the Songclave, and not only that, it had been populated by quite a few pilgrims since our last visit. Not wanting to waste any time, we picked up every wish on the board before making our way back to the Cogwork core. It was here where I realized that there had to be another way to get around this door, and knowing the sadistic fucks behind this game, of course it was going to involve a brutal platforming segment. By some miracle though, I managed to get through this hurdle relatively unscathed, which didn't mean much considering we were thrown straight into another arena challenge not long after. The good news is surviving this arena challenge meant discovering a new area known as the Whispering Vaults. Surprisingly, the enemies here weren't all that challenging, as they were all very easy to pogo off it seemed. Our goal when coming here wasn't to pogo off washed up librarians however, rather it involved learning the Vault Keeper's melody. What the fuck was that? Was that the melody? Unfortunately, we didn't have the necessary item at this stage to learn the Vault Keeper's melody. Alas, there were plenty of things to do while we were in the Whispering Vaults, the first of which saw us smacking the shit out of this cube in order to move it along these rails, ultimately ending up in us being able to reach another trapped flea. The second, more important task once again saw us smacking a bunch of cubes along their rails in a puzzle-like format, which when done correctly opened a path back into the coral chambers. Not only did this lead to a shortcut, but it also resulted in us collecting our very first pale oil, the material Pinmaster Piney requested for us to collect in order to upgrade our needle. As exciting as this was, I strangely and very stupidly decided to not upgrade my needle straight away, instead vowing to explore the rest of the Whispering Falls before returning to Bellheart. This ultimately led to a showdown with Tropio, who based off my first attempt, was going to be an absolute nightmare to beat. I'm not even sure where Tropio ranks amongst the community in terms of difficulty, but I struggled a fuck ton with him. I hated how all of his attacks came with their own little follow-up attacks, as it meant I could hardly get a hit on him. Things somehow got even worse during his second phase though, as it was constantly flashbanged by random blind attacks while Tropio teleported around the arena, hidden amongst his cancerous light show. I didn't even know how many attempts this boss took. but I can say with certainty that he was the hardest boss I'd faced so far. With our death count now displaying a higher number than my average test scores, I finally decided it'd be a smart idea to upgrade our needle. As I was making my way back to Belhart though, I came across a sacred cylinder which, while I had no idea what it was for at the time, was the missing piece when it came to learning the melody of the Vault Keepers. Following this, I decided it was finally time to grant some of the wishes we'd been selling for what might as well have been centuries at this point. This saw us returning to Sinner's Road in order to save Pill, exploring new areas of the Coral Chambers to locate the Wandering Merchant, and fighting for my life against these flying assholes in an attempt to gather some fine pines. As I've mentioned before, we don't necessarily need to complete every quest to achieve 100% in Silksong, but there are quite a few latter quests that won't show up unless you complete their prerequisites. Now that isn't to say that certain quests are essential for 100% completion. Locating this Wandering Merchant, for example, essentially forces her to come back to the Songclave where she stocks some rather pivotal items. As usual, we weren't quite rich enough to buy out her entire stock, a failure we intended to correct as we made our way to a wholly new location known as Mount Fae. How we ended up here may as well be a mystery, as I'm not entirely sure how I found this area either.
Just hanging around.
What I can remember, however, were the constant reminders of how dogshit I was at this game as I pathetically worked my way to the top of this mountain. See, for the sadistic fucks at Team Cherry, Mount Fae could never be a normal mountain with a few spikes here and there. No, it had to be Mount Everest's beefed up big brother with temperatures matching that of Sub-Zero bullshit. Mount Fae is essentially one big platforming challenge as we're tasked with climbing our way to the summit, all while avoiding spikes, enemies, and most concerningly, the ever-present frostbite. Some of these jumps are already tough enough on their own, but the moment you add a timer which takes the form of railing your health bar constantly unless you reach another warm spot, it makes the challenge that much greater. Most of my deaths while scaling this mountain didn't come from frostbite though, rather dumb rash mistakes I made while clenching my ass. The worst part of this whole experience, however, was the fact that each bench might as well have been located in another region. Dying at any point in this icy hellscape felt like a bazooka shot to the testicles, as it meant we'd have to do the whole scaling thing all over again. As grim as that sounds, I had to experience that feeling time and time again, as I would always end up crumbling under the pressure at the last minute.
No, dude, oh, for fuck's sake! Fuck this shit so fuck!
I must have spent over an hour on this fucking mountain before finally reaching its summit, and fuck me. You don't even want to know the amount of shit that exited my butthole at the thought of this large bird being a boss. Thankfully, all this bird's here to do is shed some feathers, most of which we stole to upgrade our cloak into the fade down cloak. This upgrade lets us double jump, which we immediately put to use to reach this suspicious looking hut. To my surprise, the mask maker present inside wasn't at all hostile, although I can't imagine her getting many customers considering how cancerous her neighborhood walk is. While we were on the topic of significant upgrades though, following our hike up Mount Fae, I returned to the Wormways as there was another Weaver nest to uncover. Unlike the previous Weaver nests we'd explored, this one was rather short, featuring barely any enemies at all. Our main reason for coming here, however, was to obtain the Sharp Dart Silk skill, a skill that would prove to be almost irreplaceable in the coming challenges. Okay, never mind. For the 7 people wondering why we're once again facing off against this savage beastfly above some lava, I thought it'd be a cool idea to accept another wish, not realizing it meant having to face off against this flying cancer cell once again. At first, I thought this was going to be a breeze, as we were significantly stronger than we were the first time we fought this dumbass fly. The catch, however, was the arena itself, as this guy's slam attacks would cause the platforms below us to break away. As you might imagine, this made things frustratingly difficult, as there were moments during the fight where there was basically nowhere to stand. There were some incredibly close moments, but we managed to defeat this savage bug for a second time, ironically enough on our second attempt. From here, we're able to use our new claw shot skill to reach this mysterious cavern. Now, the descent to the bottom of this cavern was already daunting enough, but anyone that's played this game knows the true horror that lies in wait at the bottom of this shithole. Upon reaching the bottom, we're forced to blow up the only source of solid ground, only to then be bum rushed by some of the most annoying enemies to ever exist. I'm not sure who thought it'd be a sweet idea to mix fast flying enemies with lava and breakable terrain, but they've definitely won my sadistic asshole vote going forward. It's not even so much staying off the ground, it's just trying to hit these flying fuckers without taking a colossal amount of damage in the process. It got to the point where I'd started to experiment with different silk abilities, and ironically enough, it was this very encounter that made me fall in love with this silk spear ability, as it would instantly clear out all enemies as long as I could line them up. This was by far the most consistent strategy in my experience, although I'd take this type of advice with a grain of salt, as I didn't even abuse tools here. Either way, with the enemies cleared, we can finally make the way out of this. Wait, what the fuck is going on?
Ah, shit!
Yeah, so apparently these sadistic fucks thought that little minigame arena challenge wasn't even hard enough, as the moment you complete it, you're forced to climb your way out of the cavern as molten lava singes your asshole hairs. Fortunately, it isn't too long of a climb, and in my experience, this section of Skull Cavern is far easier than the actual arena battle. Alas, our reward for adding another 10 deaths to the death counter was another mask shard fragment. With our new fade down cloak, we can now reach areas in which we couldn't access before. The first of these areas saw us returning to Sinner's Road, where I fucked this jump a dozen times before finally getting it. This path leads to the kitchen of Chef Lugoli, who appears at the end of another arena challenge. This fight isn't exactly a hard one, although you do have to watch out for his attacks as they're all coated in maggots. Outside of that though, as long as you're paying attention, I don't think anyone would struggle with this fight. Following its defeat, we pick up the pickled muck maggot left behind, which awkwardly enough happens to be our first ingredient in relation to the great taste of Farloom wish. Speaking of wishes, we turned in the savage beastfly wish, which earned us another mask fragment before returning to the blasted steps as we're finally able to reach Grindel's shop using our double jump ability. Unfortunately, our fade down cloak can't make up for how broke we were, although in this case, it doesn't seem like Grindel here is getting much business either. If only there were an e-commerce app he could use to build an exquisite online store with ease. Oh wait, there is. Odoo is an all-in-one management software that provides a seemingly endless supply of applications to help business owners simplify managing their businesses. The e-commerce app in particular helps everyone and anyone to build their own unique e-commerce website all for free under Odoo's One App Free for Life offer. With unlimited hosting, unlimited support, as well as a 1-year free domain name, you're able to design stunning project pages with just a few mouse clicks. Odoo's e-commerce application offers intuitive grid systems and effortless drag and drop building blocks, which stands out amongst its competitors as not only a great page builder, but also the most accessible one. If that wasn't good enough, all your products are adaptive, meaning you can configure them by size, color, and even other variants, all while your stock management is automated in real time. The good news is that you too can use this platform, and with the newly released Odoo 19, there's no better time to try it out. Thanks again to Odoo for sponsoring this video. Regardless of Grindel's inefficiencies, we somehow ended up back in Whitewood. As brain-dead as this decision seemed on paper, I swear there's a reason why we returned here. See, during our first rodeo through this area, there wasn't too much we could accomplish. With our newfound powers, however, we're able to grab this spool fragment, obtain the surgeon's key, and rinse the unraveled in one of the most one-sided fights you'll ever witness. Completing the memory sequence that follows grants us our second Silk Heart, essentially wrapping up everything we need to do in Whitewood, bar one more wish later on. Seeing as we were close by, I made my way back to the 12th Architect, where I was determined to buy the Architect's key as it opened the way to another chapel. Unlike every chapel we'd entered so far, the Chapel of the Architect doesn't house any threats whatsoever. In fact, the only thing in this chapel is the crest of the Architect, which I've heard is one of the stronger crests in the game. At this point, however, I was fully obsessed with the playstyle of the Wanderer crest, so I immediately changed back to it before making my way back to the Songclave, where I picked up a wish asking us to track down Sherma. For whatever reason, this dumbass decided to go and get lost in Whitewood of all places, meaning we had to make one last visit to this nightmarish place. Thank the heavens the resulting arena challenge wasn't all that difficult, as I'd like to spend the least amount of time here as possible. With Sherma rescued, we could turn our focus to exploring older regions, and more specifically this area of the Deep Docks, which I had missed on my first time through. Unfortunately, it seems the way in requires the use of another simple key, but fortunately for us, I hadn't bought the simple key from the wandering merchant yet, meaning all we needed to do was return to the Songclave, and where the fuck did she go? In the short time we were exploring the Deep Docks, the merchant had somehow fucked off somewhere else, leaving another wish in her place.
Well, this sucks.
The only silver lining with regards to this outcome is her new location actually led us to a whole new location known as the Memoriam, a statement I immediately want to take back considering we were being pierced by this horned fucker 2 minutes later. Holy fuck, I just got anally pierced. Outside of that one creature though, the rest of the enemies in the Memoriam are easy. Almost too easy if you ask me. Regardless, we end up finding Juliana being swarmed by a group of moths. Dealing with these moths wasn't hard in the slightest. You know what was though? This goddamn platforming challenge. I'm not even sure why I struggled with this particular one so much. I just couldn't get the timing down on my harpoons, or maybe it was the spacing, as I would just launch myself straight into the barbed spikes over and over again. Holy fuck, oh my, why is this so hard? You'd think I'd fucking learn by now. After some painful fails, we did end up claiming the spool fragment at the end, as well as our final cog piece heart. Oh, and we also engaged in combat with a giant flea, so that was cool I guess. Distractions aside, we make our way back to the Songclave, where we're finally able to buy the simple key off Juliana. Using it, we're able to open the door back down into the deep docks. The area behind it housed some beneficial items like the flint slate tool as well as another piece of craft metal. It soon dawned on me however that this area wasn't the only one we could explore here in deep docks. As we made our way deeper into the deep docks, we were forced into arena challenges, platforming challenges, and one of my personal favorite boss fights. The duel against the Four Brothers was one of my most enjoyable experiences so far, and it honestly had nothing to do with the difficulty or theme of the fight. To me, the Four Brothers fight felt like one of the most balanced fights in the entire game. It can be challenging, but never due to cheapness. It's a multi-battle, but each brother has openings and weaknesses you can exploit if you're skilled enough. Not only that, but each brother has a limited number of attacks, and while they complement each other well, which adds to the challenge, they're not so brutal that you constantly slam your fist through the closest granny. Wait, what? Considering the amount of stress we've been under, I made sure to spend some time at the local sauna before making my way back to the forge daughter to buy out the rest of her tools. There really wasn't much left for us to do in the areas we'd already explored, meaning it was time to venture into uncharted territories. A decision that we'd almost immediately regret. Bro, what the fuck am I fighting against? Am I getting fucking railed by a bunch of lanterns? What the fuck? Oh my god. For such a small area, Wisp Thicket is loaded with a fuck ton of migraine-inducing enemies. You've got these monk dudes that shoot out homing flaming orbs, as well as straight up lanterns that also shoot out orbs that home in on you. If that wasn't bad enough, the boss of this region, if you can even call him that, only has like 2 attacks. And you can bet your sweet ass one of them is shooting off flaming fucking orbs that, you guessed it, home in on your ass. Bro, what the fuck? Have I got a fucking tracking device in my asshole or something? Why does everything home in at me? What makes this boss infuriating, however, is the need to pogo your way across his limbs, all while dodging these homing missiles in mid-air. After getting our ass flame grilled on multiple occasions, we did manage to defeat this tree, earning us yet another tool. Alongside this achievement, we also grabbed another Mars shard as well as another piece of crafts metal, and a lost flea. Continuing on in our quest to discover new areas, running through Sinner's Road eventually led us to a new location known as Bilewater, an area so rancid that it somehow made every other area we'd explored look like a land full of rainbows and sunshine. Whether it was enemies that self-destruct on death, assholes that purposefully throw up their lunch on you, or platforming segments that made me want to take a cheese grater to my dick, there was no end to the soul-crushing moments I experienced in this hellhole. The tragic thing is though, the worst was yet to come. See, at the top of this platforming gauntlet lies what I consider to be the worst boss in the entire game. The run back is one thing, but the fact you have to fight through this mini arena challenge that includes some of the most annoying enemies in the area every single attempt is downright sadistic. The sad part is, Grohl himself isn't a particularly challenging boss fight. He's only got a few moves, most of which are easy enough to avoid. Where it becomes hard though, or frustrating I'd say, is when you're taking contact damage from across the country. The arena itself is full of maggots that cancel out our healing, as well as the countless traps looking to fuck us up. Time and time again, I'd find myself getting fisted by this overgrown hepatitis cell, but we persevered until we finally managed to defeat him. Yes, dude, fine! No. No. What? Oh, calm the fuck. Fuck! I was fully expected to have to attempt the fight again, but it seems as though Team Cherry does have a heart after all, as we're greeted by one of the most seductive benches we'd ever seen. Following this, we freed a few more lost fleas before discovering yet another hidden weaver nest. It's here where we obtained the ruined tool, meaning we could finally fuck off and hopefully never return to this place ever again. The next few hours saw us completing a few more wishes, as well as obtaining the silk speed anklets, which soon became my favorite tool. Returning to Grindel once again humbled us as we were quickly reminded how broke we were. This meant we had to find a way to earn more rosaries, which somehow ended us back in Bilewater. Don't bother asking me how. Despite this being a clear indication of insanity, we're actually here for a reason. That being to steal this crying child from the grasps of this root. We'll be trading this child in later as we had better things to do, namely explore the putrefied ducts. If the haunting music that immediately assaulted our eardrums wasn't a big enough indication, this place was going to test the durability of our anal sphincter. disease-carrying insects aside, there were quite a few goodies to collect here in the form of another craft metal piece, and the Wreath of Purity, which would have been nice a few hours ago. Bro, are you fucking kidding me? But why do we only find this shit now? We also meet with Vogue, who had somehow found the worst hiding spot on Earth as it required us to get diddled by multiple tentacles along the way. After blackmailing her into returning to the flea caravan, I thought now would be as good a time as any to trade in the crying child we'd abducted earlier. What I hadn't realized was the creature we were trading with was somehow even scummier than we were. Miraculously, this freak somehow managed to snap our neck without actually killing us as we awoke in the Chapel of the Witch. This questline is unique in the fact that it curses us, meaning we cannot generate enough silk to heal ourselves. The only way to remove this curse is to travel all the way back through Sinner's Road, as the item we need is only sold by Benjen and Cruel. With these steel spines in hand, we can now return to Yarnaby, who uses them to perform unlicensed surgery on us without any anesthesia. Granted, the original curse mutates into the crest of the witch, making the pain almost seem like it was worth it. Our next venture saw us returning to the slab, an area we couldn't explore earlier due to us not having the required key, a problem we no longer had to worry about. Unlike the large majority of the areas we've explored so far, the slab seemed almost too easy to explore. The enemies jump off the cliffs out of fear, and the platforming, while technically harder, is made easier due to us now using the Wanderer's Crest. The only somewhat challenging section of this entire area is the final arena challenge, as it has us fighting these overweight assholes who can't help but use their copious rolls as a battering ram. Completing this challenge awards us with the Key of the Heretic, which we can use to open the pathway to a peculiar locked gate. Destroying the bounding chains frees the first Sinner, a boss who was not only difficult, but an absolute blast to fight. I get the most joys out of these games when I'm able to enter a flow state, and the first Sinner might be the first boss that made me feel that. There's just so much going on at one time, especially during her second phase, but it never felt too overwhelming. It never felt like it was something I couldn't handle, and before I knew it, we defeated her on our very first attempt. We learned the Rune Rage Silk skill as a result, before returning to Mount Fae where we rescued a few more fleas. Our main purpose for coming here, however, was to once again scale this dogshit mountain, as we needed to reach this particular bend in order to repair our ruined tool. With another tool lodged up our ass, because realistically, where else can we store all this shit, we made our way back to the Citadel where we could finally use our harpoon ability to scale the halls, ultimately leading to us in an area ironically called the High Halls. Don't let its calming music fool you. This place manages to combine some of the toughest platforming with some of the worst enemies we'd ever encountered. Trying to deal with these mantis fucks in mid-air without losing platforming progress did my absolute head in, as I'd continuously fall back down and have to work my way back up. This isn't to mention the soul-crushing arena challenges awaiting us at the end of the halls. This arena challenge is the hardest one in the game, I think. Not only does it drag on, but the combination of enemies means that for the large majority of the fight, you've got very little wiggle room. Granted, I was able to complete this challenge on my second attempt, because deep down, I knew I didn't want to get stuck on this absolute clusterfuck of a fight. With the Citadel's main guard decimated, we're able to talk to Conductor Ballador, a washed up musical genius who had been banished behind this curtain on the basis that he looked like unseasoned dishwashing detergent. Luckily for him, we couldn't care less about his appearance, as we were more interested in learning the conductor's melody. A melody Ballador knew all too well, as he'd often spend his days mimicking the far more talented conductors around him. While we were here, I took some time to deliver our completed Clockwork Heart to the second Sentinel, a gift she seemed to appreciate, as the next time we saw her, she was beating the shit out of the Citadel guards. Despite being in awe of her combat prowess, it was apparently rude to watch, as we became her very next target. Like Phantom, the second Sentinel has a wide variety of attacks, most of which are completely useless outside of her goddamn counters. The good news is that most of her attacks only deal one mask of damage, and surprisingly enough, she isn't exactly the quickest boss we've ever fought. Whooping her ass was required to complete the final audience quest, which not only earned us the reverse bind tool, but gave me the confidence to take on a few more wishes. The first saw us returning to the slab, where we used our keen sense of smell to track down our heaping pile of horse shit. Now, despite this thing looking like it just crawled out of a dumpster, it was surprisingly hard, mainly due to my eternal bane, contact damage.
Fucking hell.
What made this boss all the more infuriating, however, was just how nonchalant its attacks are. I mean, she quite literally just launches herself from side to side, and I couldn't for the life of me avoid it. I'm not sure if there's a mental illness that's caused from getting your ass handed to you constantly by some big ass dumb bug, but if there is, I definitely contracted it here. ignoring the fact that everything just described was the result of a colossal skill issue. Following her defeat, I instantly turned in the wish, before making my way back to Grindel, where we pretended to look rich only to buy out the final spool fragment and nothing else. From here, we returned to Belhart, where I found the embodiment of hell, delivery quests. See, Team Cherry, being the sadists that they are, thought that delicate flower delivery quest in the original Hollow Knight wasn't good enough, and instead made a whole ass list of similar quests that we need to complete if we're going to have any hope of 100%ing this game. Thankfully, the way delivery quests work in Silksong is slightly different, as we're not required to complete the whole route without taking any damage. Instead, the earlier quest gives us some leeway in the form of multiple hits, while the latter more important delivery quests require us to complete them in a certain time limit, where all damage taken reduces the required time. The hardest of the bunch sees us carrying some meat from Belhart all the way to the loyal Mergwyn in the Citadel. What makes this journey so difficult though, apart from the fact that it's time-based, is the fact that we have to run through Sinner's Road, an area known for its cheap enemies and annoying platforming. I can't tell you how many runs I lost here because I was too busy trying to rush through it. With that said, I did manage to deliver what I could only describe as the body of a missing person to Mergwyn, only to realize it was but another part of the Great Taste of Farloom questline. Apparently, our Uber Eats deliveries were received well across the globe, as upon our return to Belhart, we're given the key to our very own studio apartment. Granted, it didn't even come with a bathroom or a kitchen, so it's basically fucking useless. At this point, there were only a few more locations we had to explore. The first saw us returning to the blasted steps, where we could make our way through this massive sandstorm into the hut of the Pinstress. She teaches us how to charge up our attacks, which again would have been helpful about 10 years ago. Our house also marks the entrance point to the Sands of Karak, an area that introduces one of the cooler methods of traversal. The only downside is the fact that these platforms only stick around for a short period of time, making for some rather tense moments, especially when there's annoying ass enemies hovering around as well. These challenges got more and more nerve-wracking the further we explored, although the rewards awaiting us at the end of each were well worth it. Now, as hard as the platforming was in this area, the bosses on the contrary are rather easy to take down. The Raging Confly did batter my ass the first time around, but much like his smaller counterparts, all of his attacks are telegraphed to a T. The Vault Worm, on the other hand, might as well be a regular enemy, as he gives you about 17 business days to react to his attacks. With these bosses defeated, there isn't too much else to do in this area. The Coral Tower isn't active at this stage, so after collecting the conch at its base, we return to the Grand Gate only to speak with Mooksha once more. We'd collected enough fleas for the caravan to venture to its final location, although instead of riding with them, I decided to run my way there through the putrefied ducts like some kind of mentally handicapped dumbass. We'll be needing to return to Fleetopia at a later stage, but for now, all we're here for is another tool pouch expansion. We're also able to purchase maps from Vogue, which will show us where all the remaining fleas are in those areas. But before taking on such a daunting task, I decided to complete another goal of ours that we've had for more than half of our playtime, the Great Taste of Farloom questline. Luckily for us, the two ingredients we'd yet to collect were two of the easier ones to grab. The stew was given to us for free by the Moss Druid, while the nectar required us to deal with Krieg's ant infestation down in his wine cellar. With all 5 ingredients in hand, we returned to Mergwyn, who used them to cook up what smelt like a semen-covered pumpkin. Drenched in semen or not, his wife didn't seem to care, and after that hearty meal, we were finally able to collect our final pale oil. Handing it to Pliny results in us obtaining the penultimate needle upgrade in the form of the Hive Steel Needle. A lot of our actions to follow had to do with earning completion percentage, whether that was buying the final tools from the Forward Order, or stumbling across this dead bug's body only to steal his life's treasure, which was miraculously still sitting here. We also paid a visit to the 12th Architect to buy out her tools, as well as Eva back in the Weaver Nest, as she had quite the sweet reward for us considering we'd opened up all of the unlockable slots in our crests. All that remained in this act was finding the final flea and completing this final puzzle to earn the Architect's melody. With all 3 melodies committed to memory, we were finally able to prove to these statues that we were in fact not tone deaf, ultimately giving us the privilege of ascending to the cradle above. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, there was but one person awaiting us at its peak. This is what it all came down to, a rematch with Lace, a rematch I had prepared for tirelessly.
2 seconds later.
Fuck me, I just got demolished in like 2 seconds. In all seriousness though, this rematch against Lace felt a bit underwhelming, and while in hindsight there's a reason for that, at the time I felt as if it was almost too easy as we were able to take her down on our second attempt. Completing this final Silk Dream sequence grants us our final Silk Heart, which was nice in theory, but it wasn't going to help us against the final boss of the game. Ironically enough though, we didn't necessarily need any help, as Grandmother Silk is a pretty lackluster final boss in the first place. Her attacks are all extremely telegraphed, they aren't exactly fast, and while she does move around occasionally, the use of the Wanderer Crest means we can dish out an incredible amount of damage to the point where we beat her first try. Ah fuck, wait what?
A few moments later.
Alright, fuck me, I got fucking cocky. In all seriousness though, even with the second phase that kicked my ass twice, we were still able to deal with Grandmother Silk quite easily on our third attempt. Finding her shows us the first of many endings in which we see the ultimate collapse of Farloom. But if we're to 100% this game however, we'll be needing to do more than just that. To witness the true ending of this game, we'll first need to return to the caretaker who offers us one final wish. This wish asks us to collect 4 different souls from 4 different parts of Farloom, although in our case, we only needed to collect 2.
Nice.
The first of which simply required us to talk to the chapel maid, whereas the second one had us talking to the bell hermit underneath Bellheart. With all 4 souls in our possession, we hand them back to the caretaker, who tells us to meet him back up at the summit of the cradle. With the trap set and Grandmother Silk's cheeks clapped once again, we're able to play our needle in, which somehow opens up the gateway to the abyss, pulling both her and us down into it. Thankfully, it seems as though Lace was going through puberty, as she chose this exact moment to rebel against her mother, saving us in the process and ushering in the beginning of Act 3. The beginning of Act 3 is brilliant, as you can truly feel the hopelessness in every facet of the world. The buildings around you are starting to crumble, some of our enemies have fallen victim to the void, giving them new attacks and making them far tougher to take down. Old towns and hub areas have been decimated, with hardly any pilgrims and NPCs in sight, and worst of all, the Bell Beast seems to have been replaced by whatever the fuck this thing's supposed to be.
What's that?
At least with how bleak things were looking, it couldn't really get any worse. Did I just get fucking shat on to death? The fight against the Bell Eater is essentially a tougher Bell Beast fight. The Bell Eater takes up more of the screen with his attacks, he moves around constantly, forcing you to reposition and poke off his long ass body, and worst of all, he constantly screams at you whenever you manage to survive his onslaught. Well, look who finally decided to show up. With the Bell Beast back from vacation, we can fast travel back to Bellheart, where we learned that Pinmaster Pliny had gone to do some soul searching. Instead of soul searching however, we find him being hassled by some void infected pilgrims, giving us some much needed experience when fending off these new enemies. Rescuing Pliny here is a good start, but we still need the final pale oil if he's going to upgrade our needle to its strongest variant. To obtain this oil, we'll have to participate in the Festival of the Flea, which sees us competing in 3 different minigames: flea juggling, flea pogoing, and flea dodging. The last of which had me considering shoving a 50 cal sniper up my own arse and pulling the trigger. Beating the high score of these 3 minigames ends in us smacking the shit out of this pinata, which just so happens to contain the final pale oil we need. With it, we return to Pliny one last time to obtain a needle so sharp, it did help cut the amount of times we died to the true final boss in half. Get it?
This is great banter.
With our needle sharper than your mother's tongue when you fucked up, we were finally able to delve deep into the abyss. To do so however, we needed to venture back down into the deep docks where we got our ass incinerated by these massive fucking slugs. In reality, we're supposed to have made it to Baloo here, who we had asked to help us dive deeper into the abyss. This meant climbing into this dingy diving bell, which almost immediately malfunctioned the moment we started to move. As a famous man once said however, it's not the journey that matters, it's reaching the destination that counts. Ignoring the fact that I just pulled that quote straight out of my ass, we were now in the pits of the abyss, an area so devoid of personality that the enemies are made up of the same head just stuck on different bodies. Upon reaching the bottom, we stumbled across the world's nastiest swimming pool, before being greeted by Lace. She had apparently spent the last 3 days swimming in the suspicious pool, which explained the nauseating smell coming from her. Despite her tempting offer to partake in some skinny dipping with her, I thought it best that we find some way to get the fuck out of here. Fortunately for us, there just so happens to be one final Weaver temple located down here which taught us our final ancestral art, an ability that would become life-saving considering everything around us started exploding out of nowhere. With our visit to the abyss cut short, all I could think to do was pay a visit to the chapel maid who looked like she was having a Halloween party with her friends. Feeling left out, we looked to join in on the festivities, which somehow led to us learning a nice piece of music called the Elegy of the Deep. Unfortunately, this was only one part of the puzzle needed to dive deep into the abyss, the others being the hearts of the old gods. The first of three hid deep within a shrine located in a secret hidden area, behind a breakable wall on the way down into the underworks. Finding the entrance to this area was already hard enough, but we also have to deal with a bodyguard Seth, who's had about 5,000 years of experience it feels like. His fast recovery and constant teleporting made him a rather difficult opponent to defeat, and time again he'd send me packing back to the respawn bench. No matter how much of a humbling he was giving me though, I knew this old washed up bodyguard couldn't keep it up.
What did he say?
Eventually, his stamina would give in, and it was during this very moment where I capitalized and put him out of his misery. From here, we put ourselves into a trance as a means of entering the spirit shrine where Nihileth lay, although it soon became apparent that we definitely weren't welcome. The fight against Nihileth is an interesting one, as most of it is fought without terrain to stand on. This paired with her massive AoE attacks makes avoiding damage quite a challenge, not to mention finding ways to damage her. I died a good handful of times before realizing I could just whack her own attacks back at her for easy damage as well as abuse the fuck out of my tools. With her defeated, we made our way back to the Coral Tower in the sands of Karak, where we could now enter yet another dreamscape using our Needlin. The Coral Tower is essentially a massive gauntlet separated into 3 distinct rooms. Each room acts as an arena challenge where we have to take out numerous waves of enemies. The catch, however, is that there are no checkpoints throughout the entire tower, so should you die, you need to start again from the very first room. Now, in my personal experience, I found the second room to be the hardest by far, as it was the only room in which I died. The combination of flying enemies and spiked terrain made it extremely hard to not only avoid their attacks, but also find ways in which we could damage them, as they'd often just zoom out of range or over the top of some spiked terrain. I died to this second challenge so many times that by the time I'd earned an attempt at the third room, I was able to complete it on my very first attempt. Silksong to the top of this tower places us in King Cross Khan's arena, the easiest boss in Act 3. This guy not only shows us exactly where his attacks will go, he also gives us a text message reminder 30 minutes before it's going to happen. Definitely the easiest old god of the bunch, although that disappointment wouldn't last long as we soon find ourselves in the arena of Scar Singer Carmelita, who within 30 seconds showed me that she wasn't just going to be one of the hardest bosses in Act 3, she was going to be one of the hardest bosses in the whole entire game. If I were to describe the fight against Carmelita, it would be awkward. A good portion of her attacks seem to have a life of their own in the way that they move, and a lot of them have their very own follow-up attacks, making it hard to find opportunities to deal damage yourself. Not only that, but she's got a shield built into her forearms or something, because she blocks about 50% of your attacks. During her second phase, all of her attacks start to double up, making the timing required to avoid them even more tight. Safe to say, I was getting fisted on the reg while attempting this fight. By the time I defeated her, I had essentially learned how to perfectly dodge every one of her attacks, which just goes to show just how ridiculous of a fight this was in the first place. Either way, with all 3 hearts collected, we could finally return to the ruined chapel where we talked with the snail shamans once again. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were laying down getting ejected by who knows what. According to the shamans, these light orbs meant we could go swimming in that filthy swimming pool without getting dirty, which if I'm being honest, is a pretty shitty reward for all the pain and suffering we'd had to endure. Alas, this did mean we could finally venture to the bottom of the abyss like we'd originally planned, but before any of that, I made sure to clean up any loose ends required for that elusive 100%. This saw us breaking Sprint Master Swift's ankles in his very own race, clearing out numerous void masses located around Farloom, and fighting the Pinstress halfway up Mount Fae for whatever reason. On the side, I also clapped the Watcher on the edge's cheeks as well as Gur the Outcasts. Following the collection of this final mask shard, we were sitting at a cushy 99%, meaning all we had left to obtain was our final Silk skill. This Silk skill sat at the top of the cradle where we had fought Grandmother Silk, and after about 30 Silk swords, we had done it. We had technically achieved 100% in Silksong. Realistically, however, this doesn't exactly count, as we still need to finish the game and see the true ending. As if this game didn't already have enough to offer, however, I somehow found myself climbing even higher than the cradle, to an area I didn't even know existed, nor did I know where it led. What I did know for sure, however, was whatever was waiting for me at the top of this cancerous climb wasn't going to be worth it at all. I must have died over 10 times attempting this climb. A part of me wondered why I was even attempting it. I knew there wasn't anything required for 100% up top, yet I had fallen into the sunk cost mindset, where I felt I needed to see it through, otherwise I'd trip on a banana peel the next morning spawning or something. Waffling aside, I did eventually see the light, although if we're being honest, there's no fucking light even at the surface of this place. Just a few random bugs that die in one hit. With some more unneeded deaths added to the counter, it was finally time to once again dive into the abyss below, although this time, I mean it literally, as we plunged ourselves straight into this shit-filled pond. At the bottom, we not only find Grandmother Silk, but taking in some BDSM roleplay, but Lace, who's looking far more evil than she ever has before. Lost Lace is the true final boss of Silksong, and unlike her washed up grandmother, earns the right to call herself as such, as she is by far the toughest boss in the entire game. Her attacks are fast, they have near infinite range, and most of them come with their very own follow-ups. She's also got two different counters, moves around the arena at light speed, and her ability to combo you from full HP to death in a matter of seconds needs to be studied. Ah shit. Fuck, what the hell? Oh my, what am I fucking doing? I'm almost dead. Holy shit. I died again, and again, and again. The one saving grace is that most of her attacks we've seen before, as they're basically altered versions of her old attacks from the first two fights, although her hitboxes weren't nearly as bad in those first two fights. Through sheer determination and willpower, however, we were able to defeat her, bringing an end to this nightmare once and for all. In an attempt to be the hero one last time, we chose to rescue Lace by taking her with us as we sought our way out of the abyss one last time. At the end of it all, we met with a strange figure before sharing a moment with Lace and what may become one of the most wholesome love stories to ever exist. At the end of our adventures, we had died a total of 131 times while 100%ing Silksong. For the base game alone, that is a monstrous death count and definitely earns a spot amongst the toughest games we've conquered on this channel. With that said, does the original hold up in terms of difficulty? I guess there's only one way to find out. Before doing anything, I decided to fuck around with my keybinds. For anyone that cares, I've played through the game using keyboard and mouse, mainly because I feel it to be far more precise. Either way, after finding the secret mount of dog shit, I made my way to the right where I expertly navigated the first platforming segment of the game. In all seriousness though, this first area isn't designed to be challenging. It literally throws the most basic enemy at us and even includes platforms that have no risk associated with them should you fall. I'd even go so far as to say that if you're somehow taking damage at this point, I'd recommend just uninstalling the game. The developers, knowing how dogshit I would be, placed the first and only tutorial in the entire game directly after this area, essentially telling us to heal up after taking that stalactite to the forehead. As a famous man once said though, mistakes are really just an opportunity for learning and growth. An opportunity I wiped my ass with and chucked in the bin as I fell for the exact same bullshit moments later. Despite my presumed IQ sitting at a cool 13, even I knew this jump wasn't possible at this stage, and instead we made our way into Dirtmouth, the first town in the game. The only resident here seems to be this elderbug, and having talked to him, it was obvious why. This guy hadn't brushed his teeth in decades, giving a whole new meaning to the name Dirtmouth. Given the putrid smell oozing out of his buck teeth, we had no choice but to drop down into the Forgotten Crossroads, where we were met with our first true roadblock. Given that I'm right-handed, I decided to go left, which begs the question why I even mentioned my dominant hand in the first place. Either way, this took us to a massive room that not only housed new enemy types, but also the first set of branching pathways. The enemies present here weren't too bad to take down, as they died within a few hits. That said, what I was concerned about was the level design in general. See, because of my cautious nature, I didn't want to delve too deep in the fear of not being able to make it back up. Instead, I looked to explore the pathways higher up first, which led to a crying caterpillar thing that seemed to be the last remaining member of his species, as well as a club bouncer that wouldn't budge. On the other side of things, we discovered this mysterious temple, made a new friend, and came across what I thought was our first boss fight. Or at least that's the cope I was feeling when I inevitably died to him. Luckily, whenever we rest on a bench, we actually leave an imprint of our butt cheeks, an imprint which attracts our souls back to them, ultimately ending up in our revival. What I hadn't realized, however, was the fact that we'd lose all our money, and the only way to get it back was to return to where we died and fight off this dog trying its hardest to impersonate us. Now, I may have gotten my ass blasted by this basic ass enemy, but I pride myself on how quickly I pick things up, and after finding a good rhythm, I was able to get my revenge. Surprisingly, he'd left his dinner plans in plain sight, and considering the trek we'd just completed, I thought we deserved a treat of our own. With our dinner scurrying away, we continued our trek through the Forgotten Crossroads, where I learned once again just how cancerous this place could truly be. Oh my god, what the fuck? No, shit, I just got comboed like that. The enemies in this first area really do emphasize how important spacing is, as moving too much could ultimately end up in us taking unnecessary damage. With that said, I had finally mustered up the balls to venture deeper, although every time I tried to, I'd just get cock-blocked by something else. When I did finally find a way, I ended up running into Cornifar, the only cartographer in the entire realm. I don't believe there's a more useful NPC in the entire game, as without this guy's maps, this video would most likely not exist. That said, if I told you I knew what I was looking at this point, I'd be fucking lying. With map in hand, we freed another grub, navigated our way through a hentai lover's wet dream, and stumbled across our first stag station. As amazing as it was to discover the existence of public transport in this kingdom, the more pressing matter took the form of our first boss fight against the False Knight. Now, I have no idea if this is the intended first boss, but given how long his attack windups are, I assumed he must be. The only attack that really caught me off guard was his ranged shockwave attack, but even then, I was able to beat this dumb bug down without much trouble. Not only does he drop the city crest, which we'll be using later, but we also gain access to our first chest, which instantly skyrockets our net worth to that of Elon Musk. From here, we blackmailed this witch into giving us our first magic spell, which we used to eviscerate this bouncer, earning us our first charm. When equipped at a bench, these charms provide useful abilities and passive buffs. More importantly though, they add 1% to our completion counter. Alongside charms, if we wish to obtain 100%, we'll also need to defeat bosses, upgrade our now, learn its arts, acquire all the equipment, learn every spell, collect all the mask and vessel shards, defeat all the dream warriors, and complete every tier of the Colosseum of Fools. With that monumental list urging us on, we returned to Dirtmouth only to find a shop had opened up for us. This shop was run by Iselda, Cornifar's wife, and while I wasn't aware of it at the time, this shop sold one of the best charms in the entire game. Unfortunately, that whole spiel about having Elon's net worth was pure cope, as we barely managed to buy anything. With that embarrassing realization dawning upon us, we returned to the crossroads where I put our new spell to good use. Surprisingly, this bouncer had been guarding the entrance to a whole new area. An area that, despite its luscious looks, filled me with an unexplainable dread. As curious as I wasn't quite ready for the fisting that was surely waiting within this area, instead looking to receive it back in the crossroads, as I could not for the life of me get the timing down on these bounces. Fuck! With my health quickly diminishing, I decided to call it quits for now and instead looked to explore deeper, where I came across the Gruzmother. This boss was extremely weak, as we only needed to strike her a dozen or so times to defeat her. Now that's not to say I didn't get absolutely pounded during her tantrum attacks, but luckily the fight didn't last nearly long enough to put up a real challenge. With her out of the way, we can rescue this pitiful midget who tells us to come visit him back in Dirtmouth, as thanks for helping him. As tempting as this offer was, my ego remained shattered following those pathetic pogo attempts. So, in an attempt to restore some of it, I made my way back to that room where I once again got my asshole skewered time and time again. Like any gambling addict will tell you though, persistence is key. And after a short while, I did manage to reach this grub. With my ego restored, we ventured back to Dirtmouth to see what Sly had on offer, and fuck me, he wasn't kidding about having the best wares in town. The main thing that stood out to me, however, was the Lumifly lantern, although unfortunately we were far too broke to afford it at this point. So instead, I just bought a Marshard and called it a day. Now, in my mind, I had fully explored the crossroads, which meant my only choice was to return to Greenpath, which also meant new enemy variants. These included these guys who cuck you after death, as well as these bushes that will literally spawn inside your asshole if you're not paying attention. Despite getting hit multiple times within the span of a few minutes, the music here was surprisingly positive and hopeful. This unfortunately didn't stop us getting shat on by every conceivable enemy, as we once again stumbled across Cornifar. It was also in this very area where I learnt of hidden areas that weren't visible on the map until you discovered them.
Well, duh.
With the idea of hidden areas lodged into my mind, I would spend whole ass minutes just smacking the shit out of random walls, secretly getting gassed at the prospect of finding something cool, only to be disappointed when I realized how stupid I would look. Either way, we grabbed the hunter's journal from the hunter, reconfirmed that I was complete dogshit at pogoing off spikes, and came across a sanctuary which was so dark I might as well have been blind. Knowing there was no way in hell I'd make it through this hellhole in one piece, I instead looked to save up for the Lumifly lantern, as I was sure that it'd be the key to exploring these darker areas. For now though, I found myself pogoing across this creature before following some bubbles into an area called the Fog Canyon. If nuking myself with these homing jellyfish wasn't a clear enough sign, the fact that a black barrier blocked my way told me all I needed to know about this area. Instead, I returned to Green Path and made my way skyward, only to be met by an enemy that could do the unthinkable. The realization that enemies could now block my attacks filled me with absolute dread as I struggled to take down this warrior. With that said, defeating him led us to this poor bastard who'd become this Vengefly's dinner without realizing. Again, these early mini-bosses are extremely easy to defeat as they basically only have 1 or 2 attacks. The only problem is I had no idea what these attacks were, so I'd oftentimes take a pounding before learning how to effectively dodge and damage them in the same vein. Skill issues aside, we did manage to defeat this flying monstrosity on our first attempt, yet instead of thanking us, we learned that Zote, the loser here, is quite the narcissist. As awkward as this was, Zote was the least of our worries, as I soon came to realize just how many of these shielded enemies were roaming in this area. Thankfully, there's no rule to say that we need to defeat every single enemy in our way, and in this case, I actively looked to avoid them as I ventured towards our second stag station. It wasn't necessarily the stag station itself that excited me, rather the fact that each of them oftentimes comes with a bench. Honestly, it was shocking to see how much confidence I gained knowing I had recently saved my progress at a bench, and with that confidence fueling us, we fought our way through these shielded enemies without breaking a sweat. This not only led to another grub, but also our first real encounter with Hornet. Now compared to every boss that came before her, Hornet is extremely mobile, not in her movements but with her attacks as well. This not only made the fight far more stressful, but also far more fun than any previous fight we'd attempted. She's the first boss where I truly had to slow down and learn her attack patterns, otherwise I'd be hard camping the respawn bench. That said, she leaves enough time between her attacks to get plenty of heals off, so we did manage to defeat her on our first attempt. A reward for besting Hornet was the Mothwing Cloak, a cloak that somehow gives us the ability to dash. Using it, we're able to reach areas and complete platforming challenges we had no hope of completing beforehand, although it didn't miraculously make me better at it either, if we're being honest. As cool as this dashing mechanic was, my dogshit platforming had left me with one mask, a mask I lost to one of the weakest enemies in the entire game. There's something to be said about the fear of dying, especially when you know doing so results in you losing all of your geo and returning to that imprint of your arse cheeks. It makes navigating Hallownest a daunting experience, especially when you're low on masks. For my own personal peace of mind, I look to return to the Forgotten Crossroads where I paid a visit to the old grub guy, only to realize the grubs we'd been saving had ended up here. Better yet, this guy seemed to reward us for returning his children, not only with geo but with some other beneficial items. After a quick visit to Dirtmouth where we talked to Tiso, we returned to the Forgotten Crossroads, although it didn't take long to discover a wholly new area. It's here where we meet with Leg Eater, a strange bug that sells some of the best charms in the entire game. Unfortunately, they're pretty useless on someone like me, as they break for good the moment you die. We will need to buy these bad boys eventually if we're going to have any hope of 100%ing this game, but for now, I was far too occupied with taking out these Walking King oyster mushrooms. Their love for headbanging was inspiring to say the least, but they weren't all that tough, and after collecting our first charm notch, we continued our quest which saw us stalking Hornet. Luckily for us, restraining orders hadn't been issued in Hallownest for years, meaning there was no possible way Hornet could escape our grasp. Alright, never mind. Having been absolutely humbled, we looked to regain some of that lost aura by clearing out the Mantis Village, a hostile area in which we had to prove ourselves worthy of being the main character. This saw us challenging the Mantis Lords, which remain one of the best fights in the entire game. The sheer pace at which these guys attack caught me off guard multiple times, although the hardest attack to avoid in my personal opinion are these goddamn discs that change height throughout their trajectory. To no one's surprise I'm sure, I was caught trying to heal and ultimately dispatched as a weakling as I found myself whisked away to my arse cheeks imprint once again. It was at this moment that I realized just how AIDS some of these runbacks could be, as I tried my best to navigate my way through countless mantises all trying to get a piece of this arse. Considering how unfamiliar I was with these enemies, it was almost a given I'd take some damage on the way to the Mantis Lords again, which wasn't exactly ideal as these guys were relentless in their pursuit, especially when having to deal with two of them at once. With that said, I had discovered opportunities to get a quick heal in, and while I wasn't taking advantage of every opportunity to get some damage in, I did eventually manage to whittle them down and earn their respect. expect. Our reward for beating them, however, was entry to one of the worst areas in the entire game. Even though I managed to find Cornifer almost immediately, there was no way in hell I was going to venture through this area without any light after having heard these horrifying sounds.
Oh my fucking god, yeah, there's no fucking shot on doing that. What?
Instead, I picked up the Mantis Claw ability as I made my way back to the Queen's Station. I had planned on picking up the Lumifly Lantern from Sly, but not before trying my hand at this platforming challenge, which I was expectedly wank at.
Ah, I see. Maybe I shouldn't fucking dash into that shit. Oh my fucking god.
The pain that came from dashing headfirst into a set of thorns over and over again was in the end worth it, as we grabbed yet another mask shard. We then finished our first full mask by using our new Mantis Claw ability to reach this area filled with pure nightmare fuel. With our cortisol levels reaching near infinite peaks, we looked to calm down in the hot springs, only to find two arseholes talking shit about us.
Wait, are these guys, are they talking shit? Wait, they actually are. Wait, they quiet down when I'm close to them. Wait, are you kidding me? I'm getting roasted by bugs.
I'd never admit it in front of them, but their whispering insults had left me quite dejected, and during this period of trance, I'd somehow found myself facing off against the brooding Morlek. If being roasted by a duo of butt-naked bugs sitting in a massive bath wasn't embarrassing enough, I was once again reminded just how doo-doo I was at this game. I'm not sure what it was about this boss, I just couldn't wrap my head around how to dodge most of his attacks. His quick melee attacks in particular caught me off guard more times than I like to admit, as I was often focused on dodging the plops of piss raining down on us. Ironically enough, this simple boss was the hardest one I'd faced so far. Even after learning I could dash over him to avoid his vomit attack, it still wasn't smooth sailing. I must have died 4 or 5 times before I finally locked in and defeated him. We're rewarded with another mask shard for our efforts, which I doubled up on after returning to the Stone Sanctuary. Following this, I made my way back into the Fog Canyon before eventually ending up at the Overgrown Mound. This place wasn't so much a mound than a nest for these little bomb diving critters, although at this point we'd perfected our timing, meaning they weren't too bad to deal with even as a large group. It was at the end of this mound where we obtained our second spell. Our next movement saw us stealing from the dead, coming across a suspicious banker, and generally just not knowing where the fuck to go next. I must have spent a good 30 minutes just running around within different areas being completely lost before I remembered the area in which we'd last seen Hornet. Apparently this marked the end of the Pilgrim's Way, and while the bridge had been retracted, our Mantis Claw allowed us to navigate through these thorned tunnels, ultimately ending off at the levers required to open up the bridge once again. Not only that, but we were able to insert the city crest that had been dropped by the False Knight into the statue here, granting us access to the City of Tears. Now I've got to say, nothing had moved me nearly as much as the dynamic music in this city, and listening to it open up into this grand melody the moment you reach the crown level was nothing short of orgasmic. Unfortunately, blowing my load wasn't going to help us in our quest for 100%. What would certainly help, however, was a stronger weapon, and luckily for us, the City of Tears just so happens to house the best nailsmith in the entire land. Or he could just be the only nailsmith. I mean, who knows? Strangely, he requested our left nutsack in return for upgrading our nails, something I wasn't exactly ready to part with just yet. So instead, I looked to explore the rest of the city, eliminating any guard that stood in my way. For as many guards as there were patrolling the city grounds, none of them seemed particularly hard to defeat, especially when half of them would rather kill themselves than fight us.
Wait, what? You fucking dumbass.
After paying Cornifer for another map, we spend more money for a bench as well as the access rights to this lift. Being perpetually broke wasn't a great feeling, but opening up this elevator did result in us grabbing our first soul fragment. It also allowed us to reach the Soul Sanctum, the worst area in the entire city, as it features an enemy type so annoying, I'd rather dip my sack into a boiling pot of tea than face these guys.
Oh my, why is it, holy, this is so fun. Why does it feel like I'm getting fucking railed, man? Holy shit.
As I expected, things would only get worse the higher up I climbed, and soon enough, I was trapped in a room with a soul warrior. Now, in hindsight, this guy is a complete joke, but his rapid attacks and teleportation skills really caught me off guard to say the least. It also didn't help that I walked into this area without full health and no soul, although I can't really use that as an excuse as I got my ass handed to me multiple times while fighting this guy. Like everything else though, the moment I start smashing my head against something, I don't give up until I break it down. Now despite all that bravado, the moment I came across what may go down as the most obvious boss arena in gaming history, I turned tail and ran my ass back to the nailsmith, where I instantly offered my left nut in exchange for a more powerful nail.
What did he say?
Despite the Noctua childbearing abilities, the significance of this upgrade was felt almost immediately, as I could now one-shot smaller enemies. With our confidence at an all-time high, I blitzed my way through the Soul Sanctum only to arrive at that unsettling arena once again. As expected, this rooftop acted as the arena in which we had to fight the Soul Master, one of the more annoying bosses we'd come across so far. The main struggle in finding this wannabe magician is having to deal with his constant teleporting. See, before every attack, he will teleport to a random position, and considering how fast some of his attacks are, it's easy to get overwhelmed and not be able to react in time. Even worse, he's got this attack that will literally fake you out, causing you to dodge at the worst possible time.
Oh, you fucking cunt.
There were multiple times where I was down to my last mask, but the one saving grace about this boss is there are very obvious openings in which we can get a heal off. It was incredibly tense, but we were able to defeat this guy on our first attempt, or at least that's what I thought. For the first time ever, we'd come across a boss with a second phase, and while he only seemed to have 2 attacks, the fact I was stuck on one mask made every moment extremely crucial. With that said, the fact that he stands still while shooting these orbs makes it extremely easy to get some solid damage on him in a short time frame, ultimately leading to his defeat and us obtaining the spell Desolate Dive. Like many of the spells in this game, we're given a chance to use it straight away, although I don't appreciate the fact that we were dropped into a cesspool of ghosts whose only purpose seemed to be wanting to fondle our last remaining testicle. In hopes of keeping things PG, let's just say I managed to handle these ghosts with one hand before reaching yet another grub. Back in the City of Tears, we used the simple key we had found on this body to open up the manhole leading to the city's sewerage system. Now, you'd think infrastructure responsible for moving literal shit would be better protected, yet these drainage systems house everything from these pufferfish ripoffs to literal bomb diving birds. If that wasn't bizarre enough, we somehow found a mask shard down here, while also learning of the knight's carefree disposition despite jumping around in literal sewage water. The icing on the cake, however, revealed itself as we entered another suspiciously open room. Ignoring why the fuck this guy even exists, he isn't exactly a tough boss. Sure, his unpredictable movements and bounces make it harder to avoid his attacks, but there's honestly ample time to get some heals off should you need them, as well as the fact that he stands completely still while throwing literal shit at us, making it easy to pile on a ton of damage. Following his defeat, we grabbed the defender's crest before making our way back to the City of Tears. I know it feels like we've been here for a while, but I hadn't even explored the other side of the city yet, and there was a very good reason why.
Holy look at all this damage!
These massive guards were extremely cancerous to deal with. Not only did they block a good majority of my attacks, the fact their strikes did 2 whole masks of damage meant I had to play extremely cautiously when fighting them. This was only amplified when I was stuck in the smallest room possible with one of them, all because I needed to save these dumbass grubs. That said, I think out of all of my encounters with these great Huss sentries, this fight here was the most beneficial in learning how to deal with them. The other benefit of fighting our way to the side of the city was discovering King's Station. Seeing as we were already here, I made the executive decision to return to Dirtmouth, as Sly's shop contained the last mask shard I'd need to complete yet another full mask. By some miracle, we were low-key rich at this point, meaning I felt inclined to doomspend to the point of being broke once again. With our in-game savings matching that of my IRL savings, we made our way back to the King's Station, where I was lulled into a false sense of security as I believed the area above this station would be just as tame as the station itself. To our enemies' dismay though, persistence was my middle name, meaning I wasn't going to back down until I'd become pesticide itself and nuked this entire room of bugs. I didn't care if this meant we'd spend most of our time dashing from side to side to sneak in heals. All I cared about was that final vessel fragment hidden behind the locked gate. With our first soul vessel completed, I was curious to see where this massive lift would take us. Safe to say, it didn't take us anywhere we wanted to be.
Yeah, no thank you. I don't want to fight that guy.
Joking aside, we soon found ourselves in a desolated landscape, only to stumble across the Dreamer's Spire not long after. We learn of the 3 dreamers and their lifelong goal of breaking the Guinness World Record for the longest time asleep. In reality though, they're just lazy bums who imprisoned our helpless brother behind the seal in the Temple of the Black Egg, and wanting nothing more than to free him, we made it our goal to disrupt their sleep for good. To do this, we'd need to use the dream now, which was graciously given to us by this random moth thing at the end of our first dream sequence. Awkwardly, we wake in the wings of the seer who's been bathing and feeding us during our week-long hibernation session. As such, she becomes an important NPC to us, not only for her caretaking abilities, but for the numerous items she offers in return for charging up the dream now with essence. This essence can be garnered in multiple ways, the simplest of which is defeating dream warriors like Zero here. The large majority of these dream warrior fights are rather simple, mainly due to their lack of a moveset. Then again, who knows how long these guys have been dead? It's only right that they'd forget the large majority of the attacks they used when they were alive. The only somewhat challenging aspects of these fights in general is being able to hit them, as they constantly move around the area or teleport, as we'll come to see with a few other bosses. Either way, defeating Zero awards us with a cool 100 essence, which while nice, is barely enough to get the seer to give us a hollowness seal. With a goal now embedded in our heads, we made our way back to the City of Tears, where we stumbled across yet another door with a simple lock. Luckily, I hadn't bought the simple key from Sly yet, and while it posed some financial struggles, it soon became clear that this was one of our best investments to date.
Ooh, the pleasure house, yeah? Ooh, I wonder what spicy stuff the knight's gonna get up to in here.
2 seconds later.
Well, that was fucking shite. What a waste of money.
In reality though, there really wasn't much to do here at this stage. In fact, all we got out of this was a rather disappointing concert from Marissa here. She was so off it in fact that we ended up putting her out of her misery, before offering the only bug to have an eating disorder despite having passed away. As I was making my way out of the City of Tears, I came across another method to farm essence in the form of these roots. Dream nailing them causes them to shoot their load throughout the surrounding area, and it's up to us to awkwardly platform our way around it in order to collect them all. With no idea where to go next, I scoured my map for an area I hadn't explored yet, and despite my hesitancy, there seemed to be only one answer. Safe to say, I wasn't looking forward to whatever was waiting for me in these horrific tunnels. The Lumify lantern that I'd worked so hard to obtain earlier on in the game had now become our worst purchase of all time. And why is that, you ask? Because it illuminated some of the most terrifying enemies in the entire game.
Brother, what's that?
When it comes to locations in Hallownest, I doubt many, if any, could match how hopeless and terrified Deepnest makes new players feel. You can barely see shit, you have these massive fucking centipedes that you can't damage burrowing throughout the area, not to mention the numerous pathways that lead to nothing but pain.
Oh my god, I fucking hate this place.
Honestly, I can't think of a worse place to die. I mean, imagine having to traverse this nightmare with the fear that if you die again, you'd lose all your hard-earned money. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I still hadn't gotten pogoing down pat by this point, evident by the numerous mistakes I'd make while trying to platform through this area. With that said, I need to know which sick fuck thought it'd be a sick idea to have us bouncing off these freakish centipedes while attempting to dash and avoid these spike-covered obstacles. My arsehole had never been clenched for such a prolonged period of time, which is something I really didn't need to say, but I honestly can't think of a better way to illustrate how unsettling this area really was. Even after completing this platforming segment and grabbing another vessel fragment, there was no time to rest, as our enemies thought it'd be a sweet idea to reanimate themselves into walking corpses, essentially hard-locking our heart rate to a tame 140 beats per minute.
What the fuck is that sound? Don't you fucking dare. Don't you fucking dare.
Ironically enough, it seems we weren't the only ones struggling to carve a path throughout this area, as we once again ran into this mighty loser. To no one's surprise, he was still a narcissistic asshole who spent most of his time glazing his nail. The more we explored, the more our confidence waned, as we not only discovered an arachnophobe's worst nightmare, but also a failed tramline, highlighting just how grim the state of this place was. The only positive I can pull from our time in this area was us obtaining the tram pass. This will be useful later on, but for now, we had another dream warrior to put out of their misery. The fight against Galleon reminded me of the Dung Defender, not only because he smelt like he hadn't showered in decades, but because his main attack involved him bouncing his scythe around the arena. Despite the scattered nature of this attack, the fact it remained his only attack made this fight a rather underwhelming one. Not to worry though, as there were plenty of other creatures who made Deepnest a living hell. By some miracle, I'd arrived at the distant village, although instead of relief, I only felt fear. The main reason, I hadn't rested at a bench in what felt like a millennia. As if I was blessed by the gods, however, we're presented with a bench in the main lodge of this village. It also came with premium service, as every single one of these butler guys told us to relax and rest. So that's exactly what we did. Wait, what? Ah, fuck.
You're a fucking idiot.
Okay, we are cooked.
Our capture places us in the Beast's Den, a more linear cave system that forced us to deal with these massive armored spider things. I won't lie, it took me a hot minute to figure out how the fuck we were even supposed to damage them, and even now, the only thing I could think of was getting in a single hit just before they started charging before dashing away to safety. This was tedious to say the least, but it was a safe and effective method of dealing with copious amounts of them hidden throughout this tunnel system. During our ascension towards the top of this den, I came across this random ass crab as well as a bench, thank fuck. With our confidence restored, I stalked my way to the top of this den where we came across Sleeping Beauty, if Sleeping Beauty was chopped. Using our dream nail on this creature takes us into another dream realm where we made short work of Hera the Beast. We then suck up her juices for whatever reason before narrowly escaping being eaten by whatever the fuck this thing's supposed to be. To the very end, this place remained a shit show as I even got my ass handed to me while trying to platform my way out of this horrid place. Dude, just get me out of this place, please. I fucking hate it here. The bigger problem on my mind, however, was where the fuck we were going next. The exploration in this game is top notch, and I can't argue with the fact that discovering new things and revealing hidden areas is one of the many shining points of this game. That said, it was also one of the biggest contributing factors to me feeling like a complete dumbass. So I'm completely fucking lost. A good portion of my game time just saw me standing around like an idiot pretending to have some photographic memory of the game map, only to then go and look at one and still be completely fucking lost.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Nothing. Me? Just hanging around.
Alas, I wasn't going to let my terrible sense of direction hold me back, and despite somehow ending up in deep nest once again, I for once had a plan. See, what I had failed to remember for the last hour or so was the fact that we had picked up the tram pass, meaning if I could make my way to a tram station, there was a very good chance I'd end up somewhere completely new. And lo and behold, this theory worked like a charm, as I ended up at, yeah, I have no idea. Look, the important thing is, it was somewhere fresh and low-key dangerous. Where there's danger, however, there's reward, and following the destruction of these more like babies, we're able to grab our first piece of pale ore. Before long, we'd bought ourselves another rest stop, only to embark on what I thought was a chance to practice my pogoing skills. Little did I know that after all this effort, it would all be for nothing, as I couldn't even fucking make it up to the ledge above. Wait, how do I get up top? Don't tell me I fucking wasted my time doing this shit. Oh, you fucking gotta be kidding me. Dejected, I returned to the tram and rode it one more stop to yet another unfamiliar place. As I passed through this area, I discovered the hive, but with no conceivable means to reach the higher ground, I made a mental note to return later and continued into an area known as Kingdom's Edge. This place is made up of tiny flies, massive flies, tiny hopper things, and of course, massive fucking hoppers that I shamelessly cheese killed. At the end of this pathway was a bench, as well as the hut of Nailmaster Oro, who I most definitely didn't mistake as Oreo for the rest of the game. Wait, Nailmaster Oreo? He was willing to teach us a legendary nail art, as long as we handed over our last remaining testicle. No idea why everyone is obsessed with our reproductive organs, although considering our unlikelihood of ever getting a girlfriend, I thought this was a rather worthy sacrifice. Now, as cool as I thought I was learning this nail art, I was still getting absolutely humbled by ledges that were just too far out of reach. Instead, I was forced to climb my way up this massive gap, which surprisingly led me to the Colosseum of Fools. Here we not only reunite with Zote, who had been captured like an idiot, but Tiso as well, who I full on expected to be a boss of one of these arena challenges. For now though, I decided to take on the Trial of the Warrior, which was the first of 3 arena challenges. What I noticed immediately, however, was the fact that these challenges included enemies that I'd never seen before. I later learned that there are enemies in these trials that only appear in the Colosseum of Fools, making it harder to learn their attack patterns given the limited exposure we've had to them. With that said, the arena is wide enough to dash across, giving us plenty of time to heal in between waves should we need to. Things do get harder the further into the trials we get, with spikes emerging from the ground forcing us to fight on top of platforms. And as we'll come to see in future trials, the most challenging aspects usually come from when we're unable to stand at all. But for now, all we needed to do was best the almighty Zode? As expected, this guy was an absolute beast with fast and precise attacks that were extremely hard to dodge. Yeah, never mind. This guy was a complete joke. Completing this first trial awards us with a ton of geo as well as a charm notch, which gives us more wiggle room when it comes to picking our charms. What was a welcome surprise was just how close the Colosseum was to the City of Tears. While we were here, I made it a point to revisit the nailsmith, as we could trade in our pale ore alongside a lung to get him to refine our nail once more. With another upgrade under our belt, I thought it was about time we ventured back to the Forgotten Crossroads in the hopes of reaching new areas and collecting anything we'd missed. What I initially thought to be a relaxing adventure through an easy area soon became a horrific nightmare, as the crossroads weren't exactly how I remembered them.
What's happened here? No. Not the crossroads as well, not my safe space, no.
Older enemies who used to be a breeze now made it their life goal to cover us in vomit, while others charged us without a second thought. Thankfully, the Forgotten Crossroads became a short detour as I stumbled across a toll machine that I'd forgotten about earlier in the game. This opened the gate to the Crystal Peak, a stunning area that didn't seem nearly as hostile as the last few areas we'd ventured through. I mean, look, there's even working class civilians here. Alright, I may have spoken too soon. This location, like the rest, had its fair share of annoying sections, the first of which took the form of these laser shooting arseholes. See, at this point, I was sure they were indestructible because I couldn't hurt them with my nail. It wasn't until much later where I learnt you could defeat them with magic, so you can imagine just how infuriating it was avoiding them all as I jumped my way towards the Crystal Peak. Get it? Along the way, we came across this sad looking creature who had most likely been dumped by his girlfriend. Wanting nothing more than to put him out of his misery, we looked to execute a quick yet painless slash. The fight against this guy did catch me off guard, as I underestimated just how fast his beam attacks were and how long they lingered for. After getting the timing down though, he was a rather easy foe to defeat. Continuing our ascent, we find the shopkeeper's key before dashing through these meat crushers without breaking a sweat. Our main goal for coming here was to obtain a new ability. The only problem was that this ability was locked behind another platforming challenge, a challenge I was determined to complete on my first attempt. Okay, it may have taken multiple attempts, but we did manage to narrowly dash our way across these flipping platforms to what I can only describe as the fattest spider to ever exist. Braindead comments aside, we learned the Crystal Heart ability, which concentrates the force of our farts to such a degree that we can then use it to propel us through the air at breakneck speeds. This ability has many uses, one of which sees us freeing this nearby grub. For whatever reason, acquiring this next ability gave me this unfounded confidence to continue exploring the nearby areas, and despite the warning signs,
You're a donut! You're so stupid!
I pressed on until I entered the crystallized mound. This, like the overgrown mound we'd ventured through back in Fox Canyon, is a small offshoot area that often houses a reward at the end of it. The only problem was that these turning platforms had now been paired with these little bastards that shoot crystals out of their arse. The more annoying thing, however, is that even if you avoid their attacks, they'll leave behind a little crystallized hedge that damages you should you hit them. The worst part in all of this though is should you die while traversing these platforms. There's a good chance your shade will pick the most cancerous location to rest.
Oh my, look at this idiot, man. Why is he over here? How am I supposed to there's no way I can kill this guy without dying again. Fuck.
Thankfully in my case, I was able to lure him back to this upper area, and not long after, I'd obtained the Descending Dark spell. Following this, I freed another grub before making use of our new Crystal Heart ability as I shot myself back towards Dirtmouth. Upon visiting Sly's shop, we learned that the shopkeeper's key we found in the Crystal Peak actually belonged to him, and with it, he was able to sell us some of his rarer loot. This loot included things like another mask shard, a vessel fragment, some charms that we need for 100%, as well as an elegant key. Having single-handedly funded Sly's retirement, I made my way back to the Seer in the hopes that she'd have some more rewards for us. Disappointingly though, all she could manage this time around was a single pale ore, as well as opening the door to the Spirit's Glade. This place essentially acts as a graveyard where we're able to communicate with the many souls of past bugs. Now, most people would see this as a cool little lore dump, Me, on the other hand, saw this as a great opportunity to farm some essence.
Okay, we are cooked.
Having narrowly escaped death once again, I made my way back to the infected crossroads where I ran into Salubra, the charm lover. She not only sells some of the best charms in the entire game, but also the large majority of charm notches, most of which become available based on how many charms you own. Now, considering I'd be the one begging a homeless man for money based on my current financial situation, I made my way back to the City of Tears where I'd recently ran into this old guy. The great thing about him, aside from his stories about his treacherous journeys to primary school, was the fact that we could sell him these useless relics we'd been collecting for a decent amount of geo. With our bank account now reflecting what seemed to be a case of money laundering, we quickly made our way back to Salubra where our main goal was to buy out as many charm notches as we could. I also made sure to purchase the Long Nail and Quick Focus charms, both of which became mainstays within my arsenal. Our next stop saw us returning to the ancient basin, and more specifically, that treacherous spike tunnel that humbled me all that time ago. This time around though, it was going to be me doing the humbling, and after charging up our Crystal Heart ability, I laughed my way across these pathetic spikes. With our aura levels at an all-time low, restoring it became our top priority. This was easier said than done, however, especially when I was dashing straight into the regurgitated dinner of these obese Morlurks. On a more positive note, however, I did manage to find another simple key, which I ripped out of the cold dead hands of this loser. What I hadn't realized at the time, however, was that this corpse just so happened to be the boyfriend of this vessel here, and upon learning of our vile acts, looked to execute his own revenge. The resulting fight is a rather tough one, which sees this absolute menace jump around the arena, spawning blobs of shit, while other blobs of shit materialize out of thin air with the sole purpose of fucking us. His attacks are so rapid, and the constant spawning of these dumbass blobs makes it almost impossible to find an opening to heal, and while it was a valiant attempt, I did succumb to the vessel's revenge. What became clear during this first fight, however, was the need to focus on the little mobs that could randomly spawn out of thin air. They aren't the fastest enemies, but they're so easy to miss as you're trying to avoid the vessel's attacks that they often surprise you at the worst moments, leading to dumbass chip damage. Once I started to focus on getting rid of them first, the fight became surprisingly easy to read, leading to our eventual victory. Defeating him opened up a gate which led to a small enclave where the Monarch's wings rested. These wings essentially gave us the ability to double jump, although before we even given a real chance to use them, I noticed some strange aura oozing off the vessel we just clapped. Curious, I slapped his cheeks with the Dream Nail, only to be transported into another dream world, where we faced off against his more badass counterpart. Not only is this version far more aggressive and rapid with his attacks, the rate at which these blob arseholes spawns also seems to be far quicker. If you thought it was impossible to heal before, here, you can't even fucking heal during staggers. Safe to say, I got my ass kicked here multiple times, to the point where I made the executive decision to come back to this fight when I was a little bit stronger. On the bright side though, now that we have the Monarch wings, there's a lot we can do. Although strangely enough, the first area which came to mind was the hive. As you'd expect, this place was full of, well, bees.
No shit.
And these guys range from small little critters to medium-sized ones that somehow spawn a fucking drill out of their faces. Concerningly though, they aren't even the worst ones here, as there's an even larger variant that uses its fat ass to slam around the rooms, causing massive damage to anything they hit. There is a cool section that has us luring these obese fuckers into this wall, allowing us to reach another Mars shard, but outside of that, they're just massive assholes. The worst of them all, however, makes himself known as we're bum rushed by numerous bees. Now, I'm not sure about the general consensus surrounding the Hive Knight, but I honestly struggled so much with this fight. Not only are his movements quite rapid, for the life of me, I couldn't avoid these balls that shoot off stingers in every direction. Holy fuck, I've just been railed by a fucking bee! I could literally have a gun to my head, and if I'm told to dodge these fucking things, I'd just fucking tell you to pull the trigger. The worst part isn't even the fight itself though, it's the atrocious runback, where we have to either defeat or avoid countless bees, all of which have annoying as fuck attack patterns. I'm not even joking when I say I'd rather take a nuclear missile up my arse. Safe to say, I wasn't exactly having a blast with this hive area, and because I value my mental health to a certain degree, I once again made the decision to come back to this spot at a later point. Instead, I looked to explore a different section of the Royal Waterways, one we couldn't access before as we hadn't obtained the Crystal Heart ability yet. There was really only one reason for coming here. We were seeking Isma's tear. Unfortunately, the bugs inhabiting these sewers saw Isma as their god, and as a result did everything in their power to deal with us. It's just a real shame that their combined power essentially amounted to fuck all, as this was one of the easiest combat trials yet. With Isma's tear in our possession, we're now able to swim through the acidic sewerage waste of Hallownest, and while I wasn't sure why the fuck we'd want to, the fact of the matter was that we needed to if we wanted to save these grubs. Speaking of newer abilities, now that we're able to double jump, we can now make our way up Kingdom's Edge towards the cast-off shell. Standing in our way, however, is Hornet once again, yet despite me thinking she'd be far stronger this time around, she felt remarkably easier. This isn't to say she didn't have a few extra moves at her disposal, some of which were far more annoying than others, but I just think the wider array of charms and the upgraded weapons we had at this point did far too much heavy lifting. Following her defeat, she fills us in on the fact that we shared the same father and that his last remaining possession remained below in the Great Worm's exploded testicle. The smell was absolutely horrid, but the power to open any door in Hallownest was far too overpowered to ignore. The kingdom's gates will open. Does that mean I can open like every door now or something?
2 seconds later.
Wait, what? Wait, let me in, I have the king's brand. Having felt gaslit, I spent the next 20 minutes aimlessly wandering around, wondering how I'd fallen for such an obvious bait. Things would only get worse though, as I found myself falling into a room that looks like it could be on the set of Saw. Oh my... Wait, what? Nothing seemed to be going right for us in this moment, although that would change fairly quickly as we came across what I'd argue is the best charm in the entire game. Quick Slash, as its name suggests, makes our slashes, well, quick. Yeah. Anyway, with the king's branding, we can actually open this door down in the ancient basin. Please don't ask me how long it took me to get here, because I won't be able to tell you. Either way, seeing as we're the new king of Hallownest, we're granted access to the Hallownest's largest dumping ground, although to our horror, it seems as though what's been dumped here are different versions of us. Well, either that or siblings of ours, but I'm just going to go with different versions of us. In the same way that humans who are born are essentially the winning sperm out of billions, you could say that the knight here is the chosen one out of a billion vessels.
Stop it. Get some help.
I'll leave you guys to ponder that autistic notion, as I had better things to do, namely pick up another 2 upgrades in the Abyss Shriek and the Shade Cloak, the latter of which makes us invincible during our dashes. With such an overpowered upgrade under our belt, it truly did feel like the world was our oyster, as long as that oyster didn't include Deep Nest. Don't ask me how I found this area. I definitely didn't Google it because I was shitting myself and completely lost. No, definitely not. Joking aside, the haunting build up to the Nos fight is something to marvel. I mean, whose sick fucking idea was it to show literal clones of us scurrying away in the dark with no music playing, only to then watch them morph into this monstrosity moments later. I was so stunned in fact that I quite literally took a pounding on my first attempt. I had forgotten how to jump, how to attack, how to wipe my ass after shitting myself. It was just a complete shit show. Now I say that, but even after composing myself and returning to his arena, I found myself getting overwhelmed at just how quickly his attack turnovers were. It felt like there was no time to heal in between his charges, and his fucking vomit attack always left some stain on the ground, meaning I'd often drop into them just to take some more damage. It wasn't until our 3rd attempt where I even tried dashing through him with our new cloak, and seeing how that worked, I started to abuse the shit out of it until we finally defeated him. With Nosk out of the way, we're able to pick up another Pale Ore, which might not seem that great of a reward, but it does bring our total up to 2, meaning we could visit the Nailsmith back in the City of Tears to have our nail upgraded once more. At this point, a lot of my decisions regarding where to go next basically saw me staring at the goddamn map and looking for spots that hadn't been filled in yet. Sure, it may look rather pedestrian, but it helped me find a few Marshards, some charms, as well as Brenda, who somehow got lost in this small cavern despite the pathway leading to it being extremely narrow and covered in spikes. Like, can someone explain how the fuck she even got here in the first place? She tells us she's returning to Dirtmouth, which in Dung Beetle means feel free to stop by whenever you want. With that in mind, I made my way straight there, where we not only picked up another Marshard, but also exposed her strange obsession with the mighty Zode. Now, considering we manhandled the real Zode, it didn't surprise me that the fight against his beefed up counterpart took place within a dream. Although calling this a fight would be selling Zode short. This guy absolutely fisted me over and over again. His attack patterns just felt so awkward to read, and it didn't help that he'd create tidal waves every time he jumped. It's embarrassing to admit, but I found him to be one of the hardest bosses we'd come across so far. From here, I decided to check if the countless grubs we'd freed had made their way back home. Instead, I was greeted by a constant rain of geo from the father grub, which just proved that even in dire situations like these, there's always going to be unconditional love to see. With our net worth now placing us in the top of the latest Forbes list, I knew it was only a matter of time before we'd become the target of multiple leeches. The smartest thing to do in this situation would be to make a donation, as we not only decrease our wealth, but we simultaneously trick the masses into thinking we're a good person, when really, we're just a greedy piece of shit. Wait, all of our geo? Yeah, no fucking shot. Because my IQ matches that of the many bugs in this game, I thought this fountain would slurp up all of my geo, so I stupidly hauled ass back to Millibel, where it deposited half of my remaining geo just so I would have a few thousand afterwards. I then returned back to the fountain, where I quickly learned that this fountain had a maximum donation amount, meaning I didn't even need to waste my time going to Millibel in the first place. From here, I paid a visit to both the Seer as well as the Charm Lover, just for a few more collectibles, as well as the final charm notch. I also came across this massive fucking slug that threw up yet another charm. Since we were near Green Path, I decided to explore this massive open area that we hadn't had a chance to yet, and given how I was failing to platform my way around these basic ass spikes, it was probably for the best that I'd left this till now. At the end of this hellscape disguised as a luscious jungle, we find the home of Nailmaster Shio. Like his brother, he offered to teach us a nail art, although I was far more curious about how the fuck he even gets back home after going out. Alas, with another nail art mastered, I ventured back into the Stone Sanctuary, where we're able to fight another warrior dream in the form of No Eyes. She, like the majority of the dream bosses, comes with her very own gimmick, that being the constant spamming of these ghostly faces. As she takes more damage, she spawns in more of these faces to the point where we can't really afford to stop moving. Following this, I made my way back into the Fog Canyon, an area in which I hadn't explored at all, mainly due to this dark barrier. Now that we possess the Shadow Cloak though, we're able to pass through these barriers with the only side effect being the loss of a single brain cell. For most people, this would be a rather insignificant drawback. For someone like me though, who's only got a few to work with in the first place, its impact immediately made itself known. In all seriousness, the only place we hadn't explored in the Fog Canyon was an area known as the Teacher's Archives, and thanks to Cornifer's high-tech maps, we were able to deduce that our next dreamer was resting inside them. Outside, we find Quirrell, who tells us that he went to school here as a kid. Instead of a wholesome story, however, he fills us in on the abuse he received from Monomon, citing the mask he wears on his head to be hers. He'd apparently stolen it, so she couldn't hide her grotesque face anymore, ultimately keeping her locked away in the Teacher's Archives. Hearing this brought a tear to our hollow eyes, and in a fit of rage, we made it a goal of ours to exact revenge on Monomon. Unfortunately, Monomon knew this day would come, and in turn set up the perfect defense mechanism, a massive electrified jellyfish. Wait, what? Umu here only has one real attack, in which it summons a string of electrical pulses that spawn inside your asshole, forcing us to move constantly. Its other unique gimmick is the fact that we can't damage it at all with our weapons. Thankfully, it seems Quirrell wanted revenge as well, as he had followed us into the boss room. Better yet, because he grew up here, he knew the exact method for lowering this thing's defenses, resulting in a relatively simple kill. With her main guardian defeated, Monomon had no choice but to let us enter her dreamscape, where we did what we do best. Suck them dry. Suck their life force out of them. With another dreamer's soul slurped up, I ventured forth into the Queen's Garden, which just so happened to be one of the most cancerous areas yet. Not only do the platforms here flip over the moment you stand on them, they're oftentimes paired with these flying arseholes that shoot out these projectiles that are somehow the slowest moving things ever, yet always seem to hit me. These mantises in particular are far stronger than the mantises we faced back in the village. Their attacks have far more range and come out far quicker than their peaceful counterparts, making for some rather tense combat scenarios. It wasn't just the combat that's tough though. The landscapes in these gardens are filled to the brim with thorns that will instantly expose your dogshit platforming skills the moment you hit them. Along the way, I discovered another stag station, which just so happened to be the last one I had to discover. Apparently, with each new station that we discover, the last stag remembers more of his past, and upon reaching this last station, he informs us that he now somehow remembers the route to the stag's nest. Despite our curiosity, there were still a few things we needed to do in the Queen's Gardens, namely picking up the first half of the King's Soul after our date with the White Lady. The only problem is reaching her requires us to defeat the traitor Lord. The supposed brother to the Mantis sisters, this guy had been cast out of the village for giving too many shitty haircuts. The concerning part of all of this though is that he still wasn't over that banishment, meaning he channeled that residual rage straight into our foreheads. Holy fuck, I've never been destroyed so fast. To say I struggled against the traitor Lord would be a massive understatement. This boss, more than any other, made me want to take a shotgun to my nutsack. His attacks are fast, they deal 2 whole masks of damage, and most of them span the whole arena, making them extremely awkward to dodge. Granted, I had been caught completely off guard, meaning I hadn't once considered using the Shadow Cloak to iframe as attacks, which as we'll come to see, is one of the best strategies to beat this guy. I quickly learned after a handful of deaths that there was no obvious opening with which we could heal. This caused me to do something I had rarely done leading up to the stage. I had to change my charm setup.
It's time to stop!
And not only that, I had to do this on multiple occasions. That should show you just how sore my ass had become from the constant fisting. I haven't even mentioned the AIDS-inducing run back to this fight, which sees us having to platform across multiple flipping platforms. I don't even want to know how many times it took me to defeat this fucking mantis, but you can bet your sweet ass I celebrated it as if I'd completed it first try. Lock in, I can't get hit once here. Oh my god. Where's the bugged? Wait, did I fucking... Yes, dude, yes. First fucking try, you know.
What?
And I guess Cloth here sacrificed herself for no real reason, as we had this whole fight under control the entire time. As I alluded to before, defeating the traitor lord grants us a date with the White Lady, and considering how charismatic we are, she offers us 1/2 of the King Souls in the White Fragment. With our task completed, we could finally make time to visit the Stag's Nest, although if we're being honest, there's quite literally nothing to do here. Outside of destroying this floating worm and learning our final nail art from Nailmaster Mato, there really isn't anything exciting about this area. There is a short platforming challenge beneath the cliffs, but even this is a cakewalk by this point. Before returning to Dirtmouth though, I made sure to pick up Jonai's Blessing, Boulder Shell, and Fury of the Fallen, just so I'd never have to come back to this place. Back in Dirtmouth, I paid Sly another visit, only to find an opening to a secret underground cavern. It's here where we learn that Sly is the great nail sage himself, and given the fact that we'd learned every nail art from his disciples, he was willing to part with a rather strong charm. By this point, we'd essentially explored every area available in the base game, meaning it was time to do some cleanup work. This saw us going to previous areas and collecting things like charms, freeing more grubs, only to die on the way out, as well as defeating more bosses, after getting my ass kicked first. The best thing to come out of this small scavenger hunt was the ability to place a dream gate wherever we wished. This pretty much killed any semblance of a run back, as all we needed to do was drop a dream gate just before the boss arena, and any time we died, we could teleport back to it within seconds. Speaking of which, the first place I wanted to test out this dream gate was back at the Hive. I had the unfortunate experience of getting my cheeks clapped by a literal bee. I had to live with that shame for days on end, but now I was about to exact my revenge. Granted, I wasn't overly confident, evident by the fact that I dropped a dream gate down like a little pussy outside of his arena. Despite my cautious approach though, the Hive Knight this time around went down without much struggle. I guess our coiled nail and the ability to dash through literal attacks was too much for this bee's stripe ass to handle, and before long we'd claimed his tribe's holy treasure, the Hive Blood Charm. From here, I continued to climb up Kingdom's Edge before coming across another black barrier. Behind this barrier was another warrior dreamer, and let's just say, he was by far the hardest yet. What makes Markoth so hard is the fact that he's constantly firing out these little spears, meaning you have absolutely no time to stop and heal yourself should you need to. Alongside this, Markoth starts the fight with a shield that rotates around him, dealing contact damage should you hit them. This then turns into 2 shields, making your odds of hitting him less likely than getting hit by lightning strikes every day of the week. For a month straight. I will admit, I got pretty lucky on my 3rd attempt as I managed to defeat him with 1 mask to spare. We weren't the only ones having a hard time though, as upon ascending Kingdom's Edge, I came across a rather saddening sight. No, Tiso, what? Damn, he actually got his cheeks clapped. As depressing as his death was, we'd be meeting him in heaven soon enough, as I was fondled by the collector moments later. Dying to this guy in hindsight is pretty embarrassing, as he's most definitely one of the easier bosses we've had to deal with. A lot of this fight just comes down to spacing and dealing with the mobs as they break out of these pots. It's really easy to get overrun by enemies if you let them pile up, and when paired with the unhinged movements of the collector himself, you could be in for a world of hurt. If you hadn't realized, the collector was the one storing the grubs into these glass containers, and following his defeat, we were able to pick up the collector's map, which will show us the locations of any remaining grubs. From here, I decided to return to the Colosseum of Fools, where we looked to take on the Trial of the Conqueror. As expected, this was a slightly tougher challenge than the first trial, as it not only introduced completely new enemies, but stronger variants of the most annoying enemies known to man. This trial was also the first one to include waves with no standable ground. Not only did this make fighting off enemies extremely awkward, but it came with the drawback of not being able to heal at all. My first attempt was a valiant one, but I did falter towards the latter half just because I was unprepared for just how many flying enemies would be soaring towards my forehead. Alas, with an abundance of experience now under my belt, I was able to fight my way through the second trial, dispatching these 2 balloons in record time. Completing this trial rewarded us with the final pale ore we needed to upgrade our nail to its strongest form. With the strongest nail in Hallownest now in our possession, we made sure to get rid of the nailsmith for good, so that no one else could use his services. Seeing as we were already in the City of Tears, I used this opportunity to open up this door with the elegant key, leading us into another battle with a soul warrior. Defeating him grants us access to the top floor, which houses our final spell upgrade. The next hour or so was spent collecting things like charms, defeating more warrior dreams, and obtaining more mass shards, as well as some more soul fragments. Everything seemed to be going well, until I stumbled across this entity known as the Grey Mourner. Unlike the numerous other NPCs located throughout Hallownest, she has a particular quest for us to complete, which involves having to carry a delicate flower to the grave of her lover. Now, as tame and wholesome as this quest seems, there's a definite catch. We have to make this unbelievably long trek over to the Queen's Gardens without taking a single point of damage. This trek was far harder than it seemed at first, amplified by the fact that we're not allowed to use the Stag Beetle or the tram systems either. I can't begin to describe the amount of times I'd get to the very end just to fuck up when trying to platform through these admittedly easy segments. Oh fuck no, dude, please. Oh, someone just kill me now, please, someone just put me out of my misery. I wouldn't be surprised if I spent over an hour going back to the Grey Mourner for more delicate flowers. This is even with a dream gate placed down. All I know is I'd rather shit shards of glass out of my ass than have to do this quest again, as thanks for completing her request, the mortar dissipates into oblivion, leaving behind the final Mars shard we'd been searching for. All we had left to do was find a few more grubs, collect a few more charms, and make our way towards the top of the Watcher's Spire. If only things were that simple. See, the Watcher's Spire is filled to the brim with patrolling guards, some of which guard the final grub. The others, however, protect Lurian the Watcher, which just so happens to be the last dreamer we need to suck dry. The toughest of these protectors are without a doubt the Watcher Knights, who cosplay as statues before being woken by what I can only imagine is some good smelling fucking food. Unfortunately for them, the only thing waiting for them once awake is an ass beating from yours truly.
2 seconds later.
Okay, so maybe I underestimated these guys a little. They're actually quite difficult. Their swipe attacks have quite a long reach, but the real challenge comes from their ability to morph into a ball and jump around the arena. Because of their hard shells, we're not able to translate our pogos into free damage, meaning they're essentially invulnerable during half their attacks. Dealing with one of them is already hard enough, but throughout the fight, you're likely going to have to face 2 at once, which makes things all the more challenging. The best way I found to deal with them was to focus down one of them as fast as possible, while the next one was still being baited out by the smell of a nice roasted meal. This ensured that for the majority of the fight, I'd only have to deal with one. The quick slash charm essentially carried me through this fight, as its damage increase made short work of these Watcher Knights in a one-on-one scenario. With his trusty knights clapped up, Lurian had no choice but to let us have his way with him. With all 3 dreamers' juices sucked up, the seal placed on the black egg had finally broken, meaning we could finally save our brother and put an end to things. Before that though, there were a few more things we had to do, namely pick up the final charm from the Grubfather here, as well as awake the dream now to its final form. The problem with the latter half, however, is the fact that we'll need 1800 essence to do so, and even more if we wish to hear the Seer's final words. By this point, I defeated all the warrior dreams, meaning the only other quick method of farming essence was to beat the alternative dream versions of old bosses. The first of these I tackled was fittingly the very first boss I faced in this game, the False Knight. Now, considering he was the first boss, I didn't expect this fight to be that hard, especially with all of our Safe to say, I'd never been so wrong in my entire life. What I soon realised was that these dream variants were the same bosses but on steroids. The False Knight, who was a slow simple boss, had somehow been transformed into this fucking beast who would constantly fire out shockwaves and rush towards me. It was suffocating to say the least, and I found myself getting humbled time and time again. Like anything though, the moment I took a breather and let myself learn his attack patterns and how to avoid them, I was able to defeat him. Despite this triumph though, the following fights weren't any easier. The Soul King's variant, the Soul Tyrant, pounded me once, yet the worst of all was the Lost Kin. This was the same boss I gave up on all those hours ago, and rightly so, as I was still getting my ass kicked despite having an upgraded arsenal. Getting used to the timing of his rapid attacks and the constant spawning of these shit blobs took a good few attempts, and even then our execution had to be perfect if we wanted any hope of defeating him. With another dozen deaths or so added to the death counter, I made my way back to this seer battered and bruised. The good news is that these 3 bosses provided enough essence to not only awaken the Dream Nail, but to hear the seer's final words and send her on her way. Thus remained one last challenge, and no, it's not the final boss. Instead, it's back in the Colosseum of Fools, where I still had to complete the final trial. This trial had it all: copious amounts of enemies rushing you at the same time, enemy variants that fisted me because I had no idea what they did, and of course cancerous flying enemies that we had to take out in mid-air without being able to touch the ground. The spiked grounds remained the hardest to beat, although it was during my second attempt where I realized just how powerful some of these nail arts truly were. The beast tamer at the end of the trial as well wasn't too bad to take down, as I just focused down one of them at a time while paying attention to the attacks of the other. This, paired with them giving you plenty of time to heal, makes for a rather lackluster final wave. With the final trial completed, we could now make our way over to the Temple of the Black Egg, where we see the absolute state of our brother. Unsure if this was some bondage kink of his, we free him from his shackles, only for him to let out the same sound he makes after I clapped his cheeks in Smash Bros. It soon became obvious, however, that this was no longer our brother, as he'd momentarily stab himself throughout the fight.
It's time to stop!
This fight for the most part is quite the spectacle, but it's not all that hard, most definitely by design, as we're fighting what seems to be the infected, bruised version of the Hollow Knight. Having done more damage to himself than we had, we were eventually given the opportunity to siphon the infection straight out of him, thus becoming the chosen one who sealed the infection all by ourselves. The game ends with the realization that we've now taken the Hollow Knight's place, and with no hope of another character as strong as us appearing, we knew we were cooked for all eternity. That's how my first playthrough came to an end. With our game completion totaling 102% and the completion achievement acquired, we had technically 100%ed the base game, or at least that's what I thought. In all honesty, the script had been written up to this point with this playthrough in mind. Sure, I thought the Hollow Knight boss was rather disappointing, but I could understand why it was so based on the narrative itself. With that said, as I do with most of my videos, I like to research a bit just to help when talking about specific events or characters. And during this very research, I'd learnt about the true ending, as well as an even more intimidating boss. Now I don't usually admit to this, but I was low-key addicted to this game, so any excuse to continue playing it, I took. Thus I jumped back into Hallownest and made my way back to the palace grounds where a broken knight laid. Dreammailing him takes us to a tranquil area known as the White Palace, and while there are a few enemies, this whole palace essentially acts as one final platforming challenge. Now, if you hadn't realized while watching, I wasn't exactly a connoisseur of the platforming in this game, so a whole ass platforming challenge disguised as a palace wasn't exactly something I came into with much confidence. With that said, there were only a few areas in which I truly struggled, mainly when it required me to bounce off these goddamn razor blades. I also seem to have this innate ability to always fuck up my spacing when using the Crystal Heart ability. Now, despite my constant need to dash into these spinning blades, I was making good progress. If you hadn't noticed, I was using the Hive Blood Charm here, which I thought would be perfect when attempting a whole mirage of platforming challenges, as it heals our latest mask over time. It took an awful lot of patience, but slowly but surely we were creeping our way towards our destination. Ironically enough, despite the constant damage being taken, because of our Hive Blood Charm, I was able to make it through the entire palace without dying a single time. Resting at the top of the palace is the Pale King's corpse, and considering how short he was, there was no way in hell he deserved to be the reigning king. Ignoring the fact that we're somehow shorter, we knocked this idiot off his throne only to take our rightful place as the new ruler of Hallownest. It didn't take us long to realize that this role was quite dogshit, as there was no one left to really serve us. Instead, we picked up the black fragment half of the king's soul and made our way back to the abyss. With the king's soul equipped, we're able to enter a secret area at the bottom of the abyss, which is filled to the brim with these shades. There's a few spikes down in these claustrophobic tunnels, so we do need to be careful, but after a while, we find what appears to be another punctured testicle. Ignoring how chopped our reflection looks, we dream now the sphere, which throws us into our first nightmare. In it, we have to scale the abyss with minimal vision, all while some freak whispers random jargon into our ears. Upon reaching the peak, we witness a vision of the Pale King as well as our brother. Before we're able to call out to him though, we're flying back into the abyss, begging the question of why we even bothered to climb up here in the first place. Having cracked our skull on the fall, our heart turns to the void in the hopes of it reviving us, a calling that actually worked out, as we awaken next to the bursted testicle once again. With our now blackened heart, we made our way back to the Temple of the Black Egg when we notice that Hornet is now waiting outside. She essentially exposes the fact that she's a pussy, meaning we'll have to do everything on our own once again. For anyone that cares, this was the charm setup I was running going into the final boss battle. No idea if it's any good, but it's just what I was comfortable with. Either way, the fight against the Hollow Knight is the exact same, at least up until a certain point. See, once the Hollow Knight has reached a certain health cap, Hornet here decides it's the perfect time to try and steal some of their glory. Us on the other hand realize this was the perfect chance to free our brother from the infection altogether, as we dream nail his ass only to end up in an area with sunlight for the first time. Stepping atop these platforms gives us the option to challenge something, and despite my growing concerns that it'd be the sun itself, instead it's just some dumbass moth. This here is the true final boss of the game, the Radiance, and boy oh boy does she deserve that title. Her attacks all deal double damage and the spacing required to avoid most of them is rather awkward to say the least. The hardest part of this boss fight though is remaining composed. She has numerous attacks, some of which she starts to overlap, and it's in these moments that you can literally go from full HP to 0 in a matter of seconds. What's worse is that anytime you want to challenge the Radiant, you have to deal with the Hollow Knight first, and while it had become rather easy by this point, it was still a rather annoying time sink. Whether it was jumping into these horizontal spikes or getting overwhelmed by her attacks, this was for sure one of the toughest bosses we'd faced. Now with all of that said, she wasn't unbelievably hard. In fact, once I started focusing on dodging her attacks rather than always trying to damage her, she became a lot more manageable. Out of all of her phases, her third one is most definitely her toughest, as we're now forced onto these smaller platforms with hardly any wiggle room. It was during this phase especially that I looked to lock in and just avoid her attacks. I wouldn't try and dash over to the platform she was on, rather I'd wait for her to come closer to me. There were definitely some sketchy points, but I did eventually get an opportunity to ascend towards the heavens. This is her final phase, where she constantly will shoot out beams at us as a musky darkness rises below us. In this sense, it is a timed segment, but you definitely have more than enough time to plan your jumps, ultimately making sure to avoid her beams at all cost. Once I reached the top, all it took was one last nail strike. This dampened her light, allowing the darkness to grab a hold of her. Our brother seemed to be at the forefront of it all, and with his help, we were able to bitch slap the shit out of the Radiance. The game ends from Hornet's point of view. With the Radiance defeated, the Temple of the Black Egg dissipates, taking away the void in our heart alongside it. Alas, all that remains is our cracked skull, the same one we'd received when taking that fall from before. But with the infection gone, the rest of our brothers and sisters can kindly fuck off, never to be seen again. Thus ends our adventures in Hallownest, or at least that's what you'd expect coming from a game that cost at most $15. In reality, Team Cherry knew there was more to expand on here, more challenges to create, more lore to uncover, and most importantly, more hardcore railing to inflict on their poor, desperate fanbase. The developers, knowing the sheer scope of the pain that was going to be inflicted on the player base, chose to keep their DLC additions as free content updates, a decision that at face value is an extremely generous one, given the fact that there was already an enormous amount of content in the base game. What wasn't immediately apparent, however, was that this was Team Cherry's plan all along. See, these free DLC packs are really just torture devices designed to simulate the feeling of jamming your nutsack in a doorway over and over again. If I was to have any hope of 112%ing this game, I'd need to lock in like I'd never done before. All joking aside, our first port of call saw us returning to Deepness, where I once again experienced my arsehole being spliced open by these horrifying creatures. What we're trying to find here are a few hidden walls which lead to an abandoned weaver's den. Thankfully, there are basically no enemies here for us to deal with, meaning it was a pretty straightforward route towards one of the last charms we had to collect. From here, we rode our stag friend over to the Howling Cliffs as we once again searched for a specific hidden wall. This opened up the pathway to a clapped up Joker bug, who upon dream nailing summoned a bunch of clowns. Ironically enough though, we're the ones who had to complete the summoning ritual, making us a certified cult member should anyone ask. Upon returning to Dirtmouth, we're made aware of the fact that some random troop had set up shop here. Apparently, they'd been conned into thinking Dirtmouth was some bustling metropolis, when in reality, it was some dead-ass town with a population higher than my IQ. Having been the ones to summon them, and with my feelings of guilt slowly rising, I stopped by the main tent where I came across Grim, who'd very clearly spent his whole lifetime perfecting his entrance. He was understandably quite mad that his troop had made the trek out to this village, only to have no audience to perform for. While I offered to watch the whole clown show myself, Grim had a far more gruesome task for us to undertake. Due to their inability to sell at any shows, their operating costs had begun cutting into their savings, and with so many members to feed, Grim made the executive decision to eliminate the weakest links. What he reluctantly spilled, however, was the fact that these weakest links happened to be his very own offspring, and given his moral compass, there was no way in hell he was going to be the one to annihilate them. As a result, he gave us the Grimchild charm, and essentially blackmailed us into doing his dirty work. As brutal as this task seemed, Grim had told me that should I refuse, he'd annihilate my YouTube channel from existence. Ignoring the fact that he was essentially doing the world a favor with that offer, our next movement saw us wandering around Hallownest hunting down what appeared to be embers on our map. Any sympathy I felt for these little rascals was immediately obliterated after learning just how annoying these fuckers are to hit. It doesn't help that some of them are located in areas covered in environmental hazards, which just makes getting damage on them that much more aids. With that said, the fact that they only have 2 attacks and they only deal 1 mask of damage makes them rather easy to take down, and after consuming their souls, we're able to make our way back to Grim. It was at this very moment where I learnt that the enemies we'd been siphoning weren't exactly Grim's offspring, rather being the offspring of his high school bullies. See, Grim had spent his entire life concocting the perfect revenge scheme, and it was finally starting to pay off, as his child, the Grimchild, was now growing stronger after slurping up the souls of these other Grimkin. Unfortunately, it was too late to pull out, and in an attempt to save this channel, I once again embarked on a march through Hallownest as we hunted down the older siblings of the rascals we dispatched earlier. As you'd expect, these so-called masters were a bit harder than their novice counterparts. With that said, the title Masters is also pulling a whole lot of weight here, as the only thing these scrubs had mastered was teleporting away like pussies. Before long, we'd taken out the final master, and with the final flame consumed, it was once again time to return to Grim. This time, it was different though. Grim didn't have that cheeky smile on his face anymore. Instead, it looked like a... Spending so much time with the Grimchild had apparently rewired its brain into thinking we were its maternal guardian. This angered Grim to the point where he thought it'd be a good idea to make an example out of us in front of the rest of the troop. Little did he know that we were far stronger than he initially expected.
So that was a fucking lie.
The fight against Troop Master Grim is a rather tough one, as Grim here has a wide array of attacks that he cycles through. They're also quite rapid, meaning we had to be extremely switched on if we were to have any chance at beating him. What I will say though is that most of his attacks are extremely telegraphed, making dodging them rather simple once you learnt the attack patterns. In all honesty, most of his attacks aren't too bad, as I was able to find short periods in which I could heal as well as get some damage in on him on my very first attempt. Now while saying this, there were a few attacks like his pufferfish one where I had absolutely no idea what the hell to do, ultimately accepting the fact that a fist was about to be lodged up my asshole. And what I can only describe as a fluke first attempt though, we did manage to defeat him, resulting in our Grimchild once again growing stronger. With Grim now seemingly out of the picture, we picked up the final charm notch offered to us before realizing that we were in fact not finished.
Oh, I'm fucking shitting myself.
After visiting Brom in the distant village, we learned that our Grimchild had become addicted to consuming the souls of other kin, and with its ravenous appetite only expanding, we had no choice but to find more Grim King flames to feed it. Unfortunately, the only Grim King remaining were the Nightmares, and true to their name, they were an absolute nightmare to fight. What makes these guys so tumor-inducing is the fact that their attacks cover the entire screen. This paired with the fact that they do 2 masks of damage, and the fights taking place in some of the worst areas, most of which hardly have enough ground to stand on, makes defeating these nightmares an actual struggle. Honestly, I had a harder time fighting these assholes than half the bosses in the base game. Alas, we did in fact manage to fill the stomach of our Grimchild, and with no idea where to go next, we made our way back to Dirtmouth once again to see if Grim had magically come back to life. To our surprise, he wasn't just alive, he was sleeping peacefully in his cocoon, acting as if we hadn't just kicked his ass an hour ago. Seeing him this lax triggered something inside of us, and before I knew it, I was sending our dream now straight into his forehead to see what could possibly be so sweet that he thought it'd be a good idea to take a nap. Safe to say, it didn't take me long to regret this rash decision. This here is Nightmare King Grim, the undisputed toughest boss we'd faced so far. See, while I struggled with fights like the Traitor Lord and Radiance at first, neither of them came close to the ass whooping I received from this guy. His attacks are so unbelievably fast and their range caught me off guard more times than I'd like to admit. This is all without mentioning that his attacks once again deal 2 masks of damage, and when paired with his constant teleportation after every attack, it makes it extremely hard to get damage on him. Pair this with the very tight healing windows and you've got a fight that bundled me up and threw me into the nearest dumpster time and time again. My anal sphincter was well and truly being tested by this guy, to the point where I was throwing all my spare geo at whatever the hell this was supposed to be, in order to turn my fragile strength charm into its unbreakable counterpart. With this new god tier charm now in our arsenal, it was finally time to pay the circus clown back for all the pain he'd put us through. Fuck me, this guy is so hard. Yeah, so even with the charm upgrades, this guy was still kicking my ass. That being the case, with every attempt, I felt like I was learning something new. Whether that was safe healing windows, intervals after his attacks in which I could get some free damage, or how to consistently dodge his more brutal attacks, every attempt took us a step further to conquering this absolute behemoth of a roadblock. And that's when it finally happened. On my 23rd attempt at this boss, I finally defeated him. Grim had experienced something thought to be impossible. He had been killed in his very own dream, and following this we awake back in Dirtmouth with his main tent now gone. Now, that was an adventure in of itself, but Team Cherry, being the saints that they are, decided to add an even grander challenge, one that saw us returning to the royal waterways as there were still some hidden areas in which we hadn't discovered yet. Now, you might be wondering, why the fuck are you in the city's junk pit? Now, I could be honest and say that I was completely fucking lost, but I'm choosing to be cliche instead. See, there's one famous quote that stuck with me since my childhood. One man's rubbish is another man's treasure. A phrase I look to prove as I used our final simple key on this golden cocoon. Doing so releases this elegant bug, as well as the God Tuner, a device so powerful it's said to have the ability to siphon and store the power of the gods. Uninterested, we instead look to use our dream nail on this weakened creature only to be transported to a completely new area known as Godhome. As fitting as this name felt, considering we just decided to move in, there were far more pressing matters to attend to. The first of which being that not a single resident in this area looked like they were even remotely interested in talking to us. As rude as this was, there was a very good reason for it. See, to garner respect in Godhome, one must conquer its pantheons. Boss gauntlets that not only test a player's skills, but their mental fortitude as well, as there's basically no breaks in between each fight. At this point, I had accrued 108%, with the last 4% being rewarded to us upon completion of our first 4 Godhome pantheons. The first of these being the Pantheon of the Master. Now, as you'd expect, the first pantheon essentially contains all the weak ass bosses that we should have no problem getting rid of at this stage. In fact, I'd once again go so far as to say that if you're somehow managing to get hit by these bosses, it's time to pack it up and retire from video. Okay, in all seriousness though, outside of maybe the Brooding Morlock, which I'm still somehow cheeks at, there's not a single encounter in this pantheon that gave me any real challenge, or at least that was the case, until I came across Oro here.
Yes,
Even then, when he's by himself, Oro isn't that challenging as his attacks aren't particularly fast and most of them have a long wind up to their impacts. If the Haunting of Hill House, banging series by the way for anyone that hasn't seen it, has taught me anything though, it's that twin siblings have an undeniable connection. A connection that in this case meant we'd have to now fight both of them at the same time, because that's somehow fucking fair.
2 seconds later.
Oh my, I fucking knew I was cooked. I was so cooked. The moment those two fucking stopped together and yelled together, I knew it was over.
Now, considering that run had taken me more than, I was guessing around 10 minutes at the time, there was no way in hell I was about to jump straight back in, knowing that I'd likely get my nutsack spliced in two by those tryhard nail masters. So instead, I made my way to the cheat room, which is basically just a room where we can practice the fights against every boss we've encountered so far. In any case, I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing against these brothers before ever stepping back into the first pantheon. Now, I say that, but during my very first practice attempt, I figured I should try to AoE them down with magic, which to no one's surprise I'm sure, worked like an absolute charm. Given that we're all trapped inside these tiny arenas, Oro and Mato have no choice but to stand together like idiots as we constantly railed them with vengeful spirits. I also realized just how simple the fight became the moment I got the spacing down on my dashes, as dashing slightly behind them following their attacks lined us up for some dangerous backshots. The fight wasn't by any means pretty, but I did manage to defeat them on this attempt, which strangely, and more so stupidly, gave me all the confidence I needed to attempt the Pantheon once again. As I stated before, none of the fights leading up to the brothers posed any danger, and before long, we were face to face with the same two twins once again. In typical dogshit fashion, I immediately forgot about everything I'd just learned as I was forced into a corner and obliterated. In what can only be described as a miracle, however, I managed to escape this death trap before dealing with the first of the two brothers using our new trusty method, which I call cheesing them with magic. At this point, I knew we were going to succeed, as on their own, these brothers are a complete cakewalk. And just like that, we'd completed our first Pantheon. This was no time to be celebrating though. In fact, if I did celebrate, you'd have every right to obliterate that dislike button, because that Pantheon might as well have been a tutorial. Speaking of tutorials, the next Pantheon, the Pantheon of the Artists, might as well have been one as well. Sure, it included some tougher bosses like the Soul Master or the Mantis Lords, but given everything we'd been through so far, even these bosses were a cakewalk for us by this point in the game. Awkwardly enough, there was only one boss that killed me in this entire Pantheon. And no, it wasn't Paint Master Shio. It was these annoying ass puffer dudes who I completely overlooked as I thought I could simply blitz them down with my damage. I guess this just goes to show that you need to be fully focused when taking on these Pantheons, as any boss, no matter how easy they seem, can sap you of all of your aura in the blink of an eye. With my channel's credibility on the line, I made sure to lock in on my second attempt. This saw us weave the Soul King's balls, dance around the Mantis Lords, and treat Mamu like an unwanted frisbee. We took things slow during the Oblobble fight and fondled the broken vessel. All that remained was the final brother of the Nail Masters, Paint Master Shio. Now, in terms of difficulty, comparing Shio to his brothers would be like comparing a Sekiro boss to a Kirby boss, in the sense that Shio is so much easier to defeat even when I had no idea what I was doing. Now, given the fact that he's quite literally a paint master, all of Shio's attacks involve different colors of paint.
Well, duh.
In this sense, it makes predicting his moves incredibly easy, as he only has 4 colors to choose from. He should have probably invested in more fucking colors. Anyway, blue shoots out 3 little blobs in an arch shape, yellow shoots out 1 straight line across the screen, purple means he's about to hit a massive attack followed by some raindrops, and red, which I think is the hardest to dodge, has him slam dunking the ground in an AoE while blobs fly out from around him. Outside of these attacks, there's really not much else to him, and the real kicker is that they're not even that hard to avoid. Even after seeing them all just once, I realized that yellow you can just jump over, blue and purple you just simply move to avoid the blobs, and red you can easily dash out of its slam range and then move to slightly avoid the residual blobs. Definitely the easiest god we've had to face so far. Considering how effortless that was, I jumped straight into the Pantheon of the Sage, thinking I was absolutely going to blitz through it.
2 seconds later.
Fuck's sake, I've always hated the Hive Knight. Now in truth, I was just so hyped up that I hardly paid any attention to his attacks. Our very next attempt went swimmingly, and before you knew it, I was getting packed in and sent back to Godhome by Troop Master Grimm. Wait, what? This is where I started to understand the true difficulty behind these later Pantheons. Not only do they include tougher fights, but they're also unique from one another to the point where you essentially have to remember the attack patterns of 10 different bosses and how to avoid them all. This realization was at its peak when I was dying to bosses like Hornet, who I had considered to be one of the easier bosses in the base game. This was then followed by another failed run where I got my ass skewered by Great Prince Sot, the hardest boss in the entire Pantheon in my opinion. After a good few attempts, I finally managed to reach the end of the Pantheon, and look who it is. The same midget that we saved at the start of the game. In all seriousness though, Sly here is ridiculously challenging. His attacks are designed to catch newcomers off guard, as you can never be too sure when his attack combos end. His final phase in particular is a complete clusterfuck, and I'll be the first one to tell you that I'd have more chance curing cancer than explaining what I was thinking during these moments. In what can only be described as a miracle, or fluke I guess, I somehow managed to defeat Sly on my very first attempt though, with absolutely no clue what I was doing. Fluke or not, this left us with one final challenge, the Pantheon of the Night. As you can imagine, this Pantheon was full of tough bosses, ranging from the Lost King to the goddamn Watcher Knights. All of these, however, paled in comparison to the demon awaiting us at the top of the Pantheon. And that's how my first attempt ended. In under 20 seconds, I had been completely dumpstered by the pure vessel. And you want to know the worst part of all of this? I gained absolutely nothing from that attempt. It felt as though I'd been decimated before I was even given a chance to breathe, which signaled to me that I would need to practice the shit out of this boss if we had any hope of completing this pantheon. With our goals set, I leaned forward in my chair and got to work dissecting this monstrosity's moveset.
Maybe I should jump that attack.
I may have thought of this as a practice session, but let's just say it how it is. This was a domination session, and I definitely wasn't the one doing the dominating. As is the case with most of the tougher bosses in this game, Pure Vessel's attacks are incredibly fast, so fast that I seriously struggle to find opportunities to heal. This paired with the fact that he does 2 masks of damage with his attacks meant essentially I had to get to each stagger without dying, as those were the only open opportunities to heal a few masks at once. This playstyle also came with the benefit of learning the Vessel's attack patterns and how to dodge them. I'm aware you can pogo over most of his attacks, but just like the traitor lord, I find iframing his attacks with dashes to be far more consistent. This was made even easier when I switched to the sharp shadow charm, as it not only dealt some damage each time, but it gives you that added bit of distance, making his larger frame easier to avoid in general. I don't even want to know how many times I got my ass handed to me by the Pure Vessel, but it wasn't all bad. Every handful of attempts I would discover a new attack of his that would ultimately fondle me into oblivion. But hey, at least we were making progress, right? It took me 15 attempts to beat him even once, and while I felt low-key ecstatic in this moment, I knew beating him once wasn't going to be enough. I told myself I had to beat him multiple times in a row without dying. Only then would I feel assured that I wouldn't choke on a fat fucking c***. It took another few attempts for sure, but after defeating him 4 times in a row, I knew it was finally time to conquer this pantheon. There was just one problem. I had completely forgotten how to fight the rest of the bosses beforehand. See, because I'd spent the better part of an hour killing Pure Vessel over and over again, my mind was full of his attack patterns, tentacle hentai, and I mean not much else. Thankfully, this initial death kind of snapped me back into reality, and I managed to fight my way towards the end of this pantheon once again. Along the way, I realized just how effective Sharp Shadow was on bosses like the Watching Knight, as you could simply dash through their slashes and take them out almost immediately. None of that really mattered though. The real focus came down to the Pure Vessel once again, the boss I'd religiously practiced for a whole hour. There was no way in hell I was going to choke this. And just like that, all the confidence I had built up came crumbling down. As I said before, this was the true test of these pantheons. Not only do you need to painstakingly fight your way through a whole boss gauntlet, you also have to stay composed to the very end, as one slip up could result in you having to attempt the challenge all over again. This added pressure makes the fight against the Pure Vessel that much harder, as you know any mistake could cost you a considerable amount of time. From here, I would continuously slip up and fail again, and again, and again. I had died so many times that I started to doubt myself slightly. Could I really beat this beastly boss? Did I have the pure focus required to lock in when it mattered? My last few attempts had told me otherwise, but this wasn't the time to quit. For whatever reason, no matter how pathetic these attempts were, something inside of me told me that I would succeed, and succeed I would during my very next attempt.
Fuck yes, man. Let's fucking go. First fucking time.
And just like that, we had defeated the Pure Vessel and completed the Pantheon of the Night. This officially grants us the final completion percentage needed to reach 112%, although it's not technically the end of the game. Sure, we witness another ending in which we're in a cave with a bunch of other vessels and the Hollow Knight, but this isn't the canon ending either. To achieve that, we'd have to complete the final Pantheon that's unlocked upon completing the other 4 Pantheons. But considering my deteriorating mental health and the fact that it's not required for 112%, I decided to tackle the Pantheon of Hallownest probably in my own spare time. For now, I made my way back to the Temple of the Black Egg, where we put a belt to the infected Hollow Knight's ass, ultimately finishing the game once more. This time, however, we decided to trap Hornet inside with us, making sure she'd never be in the limelight, or God forbid, have a whole ass game based around her. Morbid endings aside, that completes our 112% journey through Hallownest, and what a merciless journey it was. During the base game, I had died a total of 87 times, but if we were to include the expansion packs as well, that death count balloons up to 149 deaths, meaning I had died a total of 62 times in the expansion pack content alone. With our death counts now tallied, we can finally answer the question posed at the start of this video. Which Hollow Knight game is the hardest to 100%? In my case, it was Silksong. See, despite getting more tools and abilities to overcome our challenges, the enemies and bosses, particularly in Act 3, are far harder than anything in the base game of Hollow Knight, give or take maybe Radiance. Adding in Hollow Knight's additional content does help Hollow Knight ascend to the top position with 149 deaths, but in this case, it's not exactly a fair comparison, as Silksong has yet to get its first DLC. And I mean, let's be honest, this shit's called the Sea of Sorrows. We all know Team Cherry's cooking up the biggest fisting event in gaming history. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do consider dropping a like and subscribing. I wish you all a great day, and I'm hoping to see you all in the next video.